Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we, thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations, and grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity one towards another. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all evermore. Amen.
Announcements. Good morning, Senators. I have received correspondence from the Speaker of the House of Assembly advising that the following bills were passed in the House of Assembly and forwarded to this Honorable House for its concurrence. The recording of court proceedings, Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission Agreement, the Youth Economy Agency, the Firearms Amendment. I also beg to announce that His Excellency the Governor General has been pleased to assent the following bill: International Banks Amendment. Let me at this time take the opportunity, although fewer in numbers this time around as compared to our previous sitting, but I take the opportunity on behalf of this chamber to welcome the students from the University of Birmingham. Now, in the note that I have before me, it says University of Birmingham, London. So is it that there is a branch in London? Okay, so that's a typo. We welcome my students from a place that I have very fond memories of. Welcome, students from the University of Birmingham. Welcome. Statements from ministers. Papers to be laid. Leader of Government Business. Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues, and a special welcome and good morning to our visitors, our students from Birmingham University. Mr. President, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name: Statutory Instrument number 83A of 2022, Price Control Amendment number 11 Order, Statutory Instrument number 84 of 2022, Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Designation of Inspectors Amendment Order, Statutory Instrument number 85 of 2022, Legal Profession Eligibility, Chantal Allison Thomas Marshall Order, Statutory Instrument number 86 of 2022, Legal profession eligibility, U. Charlesworth Marshall order. Statutory instrument number 87 of 2022. Legal profession eligibility, Kema Makisha Lucia Makiba Benjamin order. Statutory instrument number 88 of 2022. Tourism stimulus and investment, Cameron Inc. order. Statutory instrument number 89 of 2022. Tourism incentive, Cameron Inc. order. Statutory instrument number 90 of 2022. Tourism incentive, MIC Limited order. Statutory instrument number 91 of 2022, Public Finance Management Act, resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or current expenditure to finance the implementation of national development projects, initiatives, and COVID-19 mitigation measures. Statutory instrument number 92 of 2022, Public Finance Management Act, resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital and current expenditure, operating expenses in the health sector related to the COVID-19 virus pandemic. Statutory instrument number 93 of 2022, Public Finance Management Act, resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital and current expenditure, implementation of the unleashing of the blue economy of the Caribbean project. Statutory instrument number 94 of 2022, Public Finance Management Act, resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital and current expenditure, Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States Data for Decision-Making Project. Statutory instrument number 95 of 2022, Public Finance Management Act, resolution of Parliament to write off debt owed to the government by Fonsejac Credit Cooperative Society for the Mocha Housing Development Project.
Bills. Honorable Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism, Investment, Creative Industries, Culture and Information, and Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I beg to present for first reading a bill shortly entitled Recording of Court Proceedings.
Recording of court proceedings.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I beg to move for suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. Leader of Government Business, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I beg to present for second reading a bill shortly entitled Recording of Court Proceedings. Mr. President, as we would know, or we should appreciate, the official record of whatever is said or happens in a court of law, in a court, must be accurately recorded. And there are many reasons why that happens, because whatever happens in a court or during court proceedings may very well decide the fate of someone or their future, their life, and has serious implications for decision making. And that may be used to inform the interpretation or the actions of lawyers, magistrates, and invariably impact the lives of people. So it's very important that we, in the interest of democracy, fairness, and transparency, ensure that there is no room or very little room for any ambiguity or any misrepresentation of what happens in court. Well, I think we have some legal minds in this chamber, and I think we would appreciate that clients, prosecutors, and anybody who operates in a court wants to be as accurate and as fair as possible. We're a government that believes in equity and fairness, and we believe that this piece of legislation addresses an issue that can bring a bit of equity, particularly since we are a bilingual country. And Mr. President, in some cases, persons who are before the court may have difficulty with what I consider our second language, which is the official English language. We have people in this country who are more comfortable and more competent in what we call our Creole language. And they may be able to better express themselves in Creole. And you want to ensure that when they do, the information that they present or they offer is accurately recorded by whoever is doing the interpretation or whoever is entering that official record into the court. Because it is the official record that has been entered that will be retrieved, or that should be retrieved, in the event that there is an appeal or there is need for reference to be made to these records. Being from a community where Creole is widely spoken, Mr. President, I too appreciate the need for this to happen. And we do not want any injustice to be served to anyone simply because they were unable to express themselves in the official language, which is English. And I think this piece of legislation really seeks to minimize, if not eliminate, that possibility and give people, residents, citizens, and anyone before the court in our country a level of fairness and equity. And as a government that represents the interests of the people, I believe this is a very critical piece of legislation. Often there is a level of, there's a correlation that we make between the level of literacy of someone and the level of vulnerability. Most of the time, if you look at our socioeconomic information, research, census, and so on, you will find that there is a positive correlation between persons who are semi-literate or totally illiterate and their standard of living, and the access to information, and the ability to be represented or to have their views represented. And so we have to also remember those people. So it's not only people who are unable to speak the first language, but also people who may have difficulty expressing themselves using our official language. So, Mr. President, I really welcome this piece of legislation, and I hope that it finds comfort and support in this Honorable Senate to be ascended for the benefit of the people who need it most. I thank you, Mr. President.
Senators, the question is that the recording of court proceedings bill be read a second time. Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning to you and our colleague senators and the visiting students from Birmingham University. Permit me just to make a few quick comments with regard to the bill. Under our system of democracy, or system of government, I should say, we recognize what's known as separation of powers. So there are three elements of government which are considered to be co-equal. And the judiciary is a co-equal branch of government and an essential part of ensuring the rule of law, ensuring our standard of living, and ensuring that our rights are protected. The administration of justice is not a very sexy thing for politicians. It's not a vote getter in the sense of building a road and these sorts of things, but it's essential and just as equal in ensuring that our society develops and continues to grow. And so I commend the government for bringing this piece of legislation, which will assist greatly in ensuring that our justice system functions very efficiently. However, I just want to note that passing the legislation is just the beginning. This legislation, to be effective, requires resources. You may know, Mr. President, in another life that we have had attempts in the past to have transcription services made widely available within the court system. And for various reasons, that has broken down. We need to ensure that going forward, there are adequate transcriptionists available, that there is constant and ongoing training, because what we found has happened is that those persons who have been transcriptionists have gotten stuck in a grade and have had to leave that to move on to other things in order to improve themselves within the public service. But as a consequence, their skill has been removed and they have not been replaced. So much so that I believe a lot of the transcription is now done through private services. That's something that we need to seek, address. As well, I just need to correct a statement I've heard made both in the lower house and then by the leader of government business as well. This bill is not providing specifically for interpreters. Interpreters have always been available in our court system, much to our credit. Long before Creole became readily used in this honorable house, there have always been provisions for interpreters within our court system. What this does is provide specifically as to how that interpretation is to be recorded. But that being said, and from practical experience, the mere fact that somebody can speak Creole does not necessarily mean that they're well suited to be an interpreter. And so, again, resources need to be put in place to ensure that the persons who are being used as interpreters are properly trained so that they can do the simultaneous translations that are required to make court proceedings run smoothly, and to ensure that the questions that are being asked are put to the witness in an accurate manner, and as well the responses are being relayed in an accurate manner. Anecdotally, I'm sure we've heard various times, the late Madame Susie Dovey had an interpreter who she was always correcting, because to her mind the interpreter was not interpreting the Creole correctly, and she was an expert speaker. But we don't always have the benefit of having judicial officers who are from St. Lucia and who can understand the Creole and ensure that the interpreters are interpreting properly. So we need to make sure that we have properly qualified persons who are being appointed to these roles. That being said, Mr. President, again, I commend the government on bringing this piece of legislation. As I said, it's not a particularly sexy piece of legislation, but it is an absolutely necessary piece of legislation. Thank you.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I listened very attentively to the submission made by the independent senator, who I believe has a certain level of authority on the topic of this issue. And so I was eagerly awaiting his submission. Of course, as a team who is always willing to listen and to consider good advice and good counsel. And he has made a couple of very important notes and observations that I think are welcome. I will attempt in this brief rebuttal to also speak in Creole, because there are people listening this morning who may be more comfortable with what I'm going to say in Creole, so they understand that this bill has something to do with them. But before I do so, Mr. President, I want to make reference to one of the submissions he made. He did mention training, and I agree. I think that it's one thing to pass legislation. The judiciary can do what they have to do, but it's another thing to be able to implement and make it work. And I welcome the suggestion for training. And I also want to agree with the submission he made regarding the human resource, and it's not only for interpretation. There is something, however, I think I want to comment on, and that is the fact that someone speaks Creole doesn't necessarily make them a good interpreter. That may be so, Mr. President, but I think even if you have to train someone who is competent in Creole, the person has to be, and even if the person is a good interpreter, but once you're going to get a different language, that person must be competent not only in interpretation, but in the language. Because my background tells me that people not only speak in the language, they also think in the language. And there's a bit of ambiguity that can take place, particularly when it refers to a particular context. So I'll give you an example, Mr. President. And this is that was a joke in my community, but it actually happened in a situation where there's a young man, we call him Magé. That's his nickname, Magé. He's now in the US. Used to be a very good athlete. And he found himself in a court. And a witness was giving evidence about him and was saying that Magé, the guy, when he did what he did, he ran up the road. So the guy said, Magé koui moute chimère. But the interpreter did not get the context. He didn't know that the guy's name was Magé. So he said, food run up the road. And of course, you know, that created a bit of discussion because the guy, food Magé in Creole, depending on the context, can be interpreted as food. That's what we know, but it's a nickname. So I think sometimes there are several other examples. I don't want to bring them into this house. They have, you know, when people talk about things like cake, types of cake, you know, there are so many different examples because of the nature of the Creole language that someone who, even if is trained as an interpreter, must be competent and understand thoroughly the Creole language to be able to even get the training. So I just wanted to submit that. And I want to say a little bit of that in Creole. Monsieur Président, bon matin, nous avons passé un morceau de législation. Pour ça, faire assurer les gens en dedans de l'audience. Et puis, dire bagay. Ça dit, nous voulons faire assurer, c'est ça qui entre, c'est ça qui marche à ce papier. Là, parce que les gens passent à parler langage anglais, les dire bagay, nous sommes mal compris. Nous voulons faire assurer l'année manière pour entraîner les gens, pour faire assurer tout le monde qui est dans l'audience. Là, ils parlent, ça dit, c'est ça qui entre et puis matcher à sous papier et puis ils ça servi pour représenter les gens. Bon, langage que la délai l'année saoudi peut-être manière dit en façon il y a différentes interprétations dans l'autre façon. Moi j'ai servi un exemple tout à l'heure l'année monsieur de Ruisseau non ici nous avons crié manger ça c'est sous non il y a l'audience et puis les gens qui ont dit manger couille monter chimère les gens qui ont expliqué ça idée à mon quoi c'était manger ou pas manger et puis ça pas été manière pour ça faire explication ça mon l'a dit alors il est nécessaire monsieur le président pour nous passer morceau législation ça là pour faire assurer que tout le monde qui a dit dans en cas l'audience pardon les yo dit au bagay ça yo dit c'est ça qui t'a pu enregistrer. Alors tout le monde qui a dit dans l'audience, même si vous passez à parler bien, même si vous passez à expliquer en anglais, ça veut dire qu'il doit bien enregistré et puis vous pouvez joindre justice. So again, Mr. President, I want to thank the independent senator for his submission. I think they were very valid, but I just want to emphasize that context is important. And while I agree that training is necessary, but the training, including training in offered for someone who is competent in the language or people who are competent in the language should be considered. So I thank you again, Honorable Senator, and I do hope that this piece of legislation achieves the objective for which it was intended.
Senators, the question is that the recording of court proceedings bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide for the recording and the transcribing of court proceedings and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Recording of court proceedings.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Words of interpreter.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 5.
Certification of transcript.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Clause 6.
Transcript of evidence of a witness.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Clause 7.
Validity of official transcript.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Clause 8.
Transcript as proof of court proceedings.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill. Clause 9.
Request for transcript.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill. Clause 10.
Exemption from fees.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill. Clause 11.
Rules.
Clause 11 stands part of the bill. Clause 12.
Practice directions.
Clause 12 stands part of the bill. Clause 13.
Repeal.
Clause 13 stands part of the bill. Schedule.
Form 1, Section 5, Form 2, Section 9(1).
The schedule stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many ayes are of that opinion, say aye. As many ayes are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the recording of court proceedings bill went through committee stage without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I beg that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the recording of court proceedings bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many ayes are of that opinion, say aye. As many ayes are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Recordings of Court Proceedings Act 2022.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I beg for the first reading of a bill shortly entitled Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission Agreement.
Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission Agreement.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I beg for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow this bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of the bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many ayes are of that opinion, say aye. As many ayes are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted. You may proceed, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I beg to move for a second reading of a bill shortly entitled Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission Agreement. Well, Mr. President, this bill is a very straightforward one. I believe that it had actually been It was follow-up from an agreement that the previous government had already signed on to, and we basically are taking it into this House and Senate to formulate it into a law, hopefully. Key feature, I believe, Mr. President, is that this bill is that it allows the ECCU to be exempted from judicial challenge, which I think is one of the notable features. It has been sanctioned by the ECCU, and basically we're looking to enact it as law. So, Mr. President, without much more to be said on it, I submit it to this Honorable Senate for consideration.
Senators, the question is that the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide for the implementation of the agreement establishing the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Agreement to have force of law.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Penalty for use or disclosure of confidential information.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 5.
Amendment of schedule.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Schedule.
Sections 2, 3, and 5.
Schedule stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title and the commencement.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission Agreement Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I beg that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission Agreement Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This Act may be cited as the Eastern Caribbean Securities Regulatory Commission Agreement Act 2022.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I beg to move for second reading the bill shortly entitled Youth Economy.
Thank you, jumped the gun there.
Youth economy.
First reading.
Apologies, Mr. President. I'm not sure that I was responsible for this one, but I beg to move for first reading of a bill shortly entitled Youth Economy.
Youth economy.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I beg to move for the suspension of Standing Order 49-2 to allow the bill to go through its remaining stages at this sitting.
Senators, the question is that Standing Order number 49-2 be suspended in order to allow the Honorable Leader of Government Business to proceed with the remaining stages of this bill at this sitting. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leave is granted, Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. President. I beg to move for the second reading of a bill shortly entitled Youth Economy. Mr. President, some of us in here may not agree, but I still feel and associate and identify with the term youth. I will defend my right to do so because maybe it's because of the amount of interaction and time I spent, or I have spent in my entire lifetime. I think it's well known by now, in the youth movement, in the youth on sports council and many other youth-related activities. In fact, only on Sunday, I was a very sought-after guest at a youth activity in my community, football final, and I want to take this opportunity, with your leave, Mr. President, to commend the Young Roots football team of Grace, whom emerged winners, and the under-19 team who actually placed third, as well as the veterans team. So, Mr. President, just by way of context, I wanted to establish that I have been involved in the youth leadership movement all of my life, and even now that I think I may have eclipsed the age at which you officially be called youth, I can relate. And this is why this youth economy bill has excited me so much. Mr. President, when the Prime Minister, the then opposition leader, announced the youth economy as part of his mandate, or if he's given the mandate to run this, to lead this country, that he would have introduced this concept. As a young man who understands the realities that our young people face in this country, being aware of the level of youth unemployment and the various social challenges that face our young people, I was very excited. And so I paid attention as the concept was being discussed and was ventilated in the public domain. And at this point, Mr. President, I'm very proud to be standing in this honorable Senate to discuss and to debate this bill. Mr. President, it is not just one of those things that politicians offer and talk about in a manifesto or on a political platform, and 5 years later, they have not touched or followed up on. It is one of those things that after 1 year in office, and we're just on the anniversary of our first year in office, we have come to this House to ensure that this concept, this offering, becomes reality. I want to commend the Honorable Prime Minister for doing so, and I want to also commend all the various entities, the various government departments, the various organizations who have been involved both in the consultations that have taken place, in the discussions, and even the critics who have found maybe a few areas that can be tweaked and fixed at this point. Mr. President, I can relate to the needs, the dreams, the aspirations, the ambitions of young people. I was once in that position, coming from a very ordinary, humble background, and recognizing that to be able to aspire to higher heights as a young man, there are certain decisions you have to make, but you need the support of others. There are some things you cannot achieve on your own. You need the support of others, whether it is your family, whether it is community organizations, the church, NGOs, and the government. As a young man or woman, without the resources at your fingertips, sometimes your dreams and ambitions can be shattered. And so, I think back in the late 80s and early 1990s, Mr. President, and I was saying, what if the youth economy had been rolled out then? I probably wouldn't be standing in this honorable house. I might have been a mega business executive somewhere, living large. So, Mr. President, maybe my children and grandchildren will have the opportunity to benefit from such a piece of legislation. Mr. President, I will repeat something that I have said from 2016 upon my entry into this honorable house. I've always said, no matter what the bill or the motion is, once it relates to people, I've always said that in this country, this Helen of the West, St. Lucia, without oil, without some of the natural resources that other countries have, our biggest asset is our human resource. I've always said that, and I will continue to remind this House and our people that this is our biggest asset, our human resource. And if we can shape, create opportunity, mobilize resources, and invest in them while they are young, when they are beginning to form their identity, they're beginning to understand the world around them, we are sure to do a lot better as a nation. So any investment in young people in this country will get my full support. As a matter of fact, when I was a young man, I was also involved in finding ways, mobilizing resources, mobilizing young people to help them improve themselves. So I see this as something that mirrors my own philosophy and my own understanding of what an economy and a country should be. Mr. President, the Prime Minister, in his budget speech on page 14, made specific reference to the youth economy. And this particular bill is consistent with the policy pronouncements that he made at the time. Now, this is saying to us that this is in line with the policy and the pronouncements that our government made even before we got into government. We are not just snatching at things loosely and randomly to present to this country. This is a very comprehensive piece of legislation, and it is in line with what we as a government have always intended to do for our young people in this country. Mr. President, part of the youth economy concept will include an agency, a youth economy agency. As anything else, once you are going to introduce new programs in your country, you need to ensure that there is proper administration, management, evaluation, and to do so, you have to ensure that there are competent persons who can organize and deliver the program. And so this agency will have to have a certain level of expertise and flexibility that will manage and help to implement the youth economy program. Mr. President, just by way of example and maybe a little detail, this agency will comprise or will be composed, will have a composition of a board, and the personnel on that board will include persons with, of course, legal expertise, persons with communication skills, IT and business development skills. There will, of course, be a CEO because you have to have some kind of structure. It's not going to be vai-ti-vai. There will also be some form of evaluation ongoing. And that evaluation will be managed by an evaluation committee. Now, Mr. President, anytime you introduce things, whether it is in a government, in a business, in an organization, it is important that as things are rolled out, you evaluate, whether it is every quarter, but you do ongoing evaluation of what you are doing, because there are times where you have to return to the drawing board and say, look, this is what we wanted to do, but because of circumstance X or Y, we have to revisit and reprogram. And so this evaluation entity, I take it very seriously. As a former educator, I understand the importance of evaluation. You go to a classroom and you think you have taught well, and everybody says, yes, sir, I understood. You give an exam or you do an assessment, and then you realize you have to go and reteach, because saying that you get it doesn't mean that you get it. So evaluation is a very important component of any program, and I understand why this is included in this particular case. One of the other things that will be done, Mr. President, is that there is going to be some kind of auditing that is in line with international standards. And all of that is part of the evaluation. You have to audit. You have to make sure that there's accountability for the monies that people are going to be spending. It's our taxpayers' money. And we have to ensure that those the money is vested in to spend have to account for it. So there has to be standards set. Mr. President, I just now want to do a little bit of explanation with regard to the program itself, the Youth Economy Program. Not everyone, Mr. President, in this country, particularly young people, not every young person wants to work for somebody. And I think it's a part of our own development as a people that we need to revisit. I remember growing up as a child and my parents would tell me, boy, you have to get a good education and get a good job. And they were thinking, be a banker, be a police officer, be an executive somewhere, work for someone and bring home some money. That was the limited perspective they had on you becoming a successful person. Get a good education and go find a job somebody has to give to you. But I think that a country like ours with so many resources that are in our human base needs to be able to tell our young people, you're not just trying to find a job, but you also need to consider owning a business, owning something, and creating jobs. Because we have a situation with unemployment in this country and youth unemployment. We've never said that it's not so. So if young people can find avenues through this youth economy to be able to have their own businesses, their own enterprises, own something, and not work for someone else, and in the process employ other people, create employment, I think we are going to be in a much better place. Mr. President, listening to some of the critics, particularly coming from the leader of the opposition, I sat here and I listened, and there was a suggestion that when we talk about young people, we should help them to aspire to work for Apple and for Google and for those big companies. Nothing wrong with that. No, nothing wrong with a young St. Lucian accessing employment from international big businesses. Nothing wrong with that. But I do not think that this is the only thing that we should be thinking when we speak of the youth economy. Its objective is not to get young people to try to find jobs where they are working for other people. It is helping them understand that they don't have to necessarily work for an Apple or Google, but they can become the owner of a Google or the next Apple. That is the kind of aspiration that this youth economy wants to communicate to our young people. It's okay if you feel that you want to work for some, but it is more important to aspire and to want to be the owner so that you can provide employment for hundreds of other young people. Mr. President, a young person wanting to set up a business in this country can face numerous challenges. I can speak of it because I have also been a young entrepreneur. Never mind, I worked many years for the government. I've also attempted to work for myself as well. And I can tell you some of the challenges you face, legal, this and all kinds of red tape, and you can become very frustrated, especially if you do not have access to resources and finance to get started. It's a reality. And I don't think it is fair that a young man or woman with a serious business idea, a serious concept, who can see where he can go, but just because he didn't have access to, or he didn't have the collateral or the resources to access $10,000 or $5,000 from a cooperative or a bank, that his dream disappears and he becomes frustrated and may turn into one of the hardcore criminals that we complain about. So, Mr. President, this youth economy really seeks to address some of that. Now, another argument that was presented was that this thing is, it's almost like an entity within itself. Yes, it is. But one other thing is, Mr. President, that the youth economy also addresses a number of other things. And it's not just about young people getting money to start a business. It addresses some of the serious issues of self-esteem, some of the serious issues of self-doubt that exists in our young people today. It allows them to think big, to dream. It may start with a small grant. It may start with the access to a small loan, but because of the thinking, that is where everything starts, in here. You as a young person can really look beyond just the start and see how you can place yourself later. Mr. President, there has to be a method that guides the way young people can access the services that will be offered through the youth economy. And that may be one of the challenges we have to deal with in the earlier stages. And we are open to, as I said earlier, going back and doing the evaluation and coming back to fix it. For example, a young person may decide that they want access to a certain amount of money, and they don't know where to go or which form to fill out or which agency to seek the assistance from. And that is why there is going to be a form designed, a method that will give a young person the option of being able to register and seek and get guidance. Mr. President, it is also important for young people to be able to get training, because the youth economy is not only about starting a business. Some young people may already have a small business operating. I know some young persons who they have, especially during the COVID period, they have to find ways to make money without leaving home, and they have online businesses. But because their resources are limited and they don't have the competence to be able to expand it, they need ideas. And the youth economy also provides for training for young people in several areas that can help them develop their small business. So if you haven't gotten started, there's room for you to expand. If you haven't started, there's room for you to get started. But if you have started, there's room for you to expand. Mr. President, once this is done, a young person will be able to access different amounts. So for example, if you're going to set up a business for the first time, you would need to get some kind of guidance in terms of your business plan and incorporation. You may be able to access grants or loans. And if you qualify, then you may be able, if you have a business already established, to be able to qualify for access to training in marketing, in business development, and whatever other skill or competence that your business requires. Mr. President, it is important for us to be familiar and support the idea of upskilling. which is one of the components I think this bill will be helping to push. You see, sometimes you know people who have been involved in a particular type of business or particular type of service. And since you were a child, they're doing the same thing the same way. 20 years, 30 years later, you go back there and they're doing the same thing, and they have not improved. This youth economy concept will ensure that we don't only provide a start, but we help young people upskill. Because as technology becomes part of business and business transactions and business development, they have to be what we call with it. And so upskilling is one of the areas that we think is very important. Of course, branding and market research is key. Now, I am no business person. I think my background was in social development, science, more or less. I'm no business expert. But the basics of marketing, which I totally understood when I became a football administrator, you have to have a brand. In anything you do, you have to develop your brand. And that is very important. That's why Apple and them and Google, they have a brand. There's something that makes them different. And so this is something that the Youth Economy Program seeks to do. Ensure that there is enough research and marketing done, and help young people who are desirous of setting up or taking advantage of this opportunity do some good branding. So, Mr. President, grants and loan facilities. Now, a grant really is what we call free money, but we don't want young people to think that there's a mini bank that you can just go get money. I think the leader of the opposition tried to describe the youth economy as a mini bank. This is not the case. It is really not that way at all, Mr. President. It's not just about the loans. As the Prime Minister put it, it's helping young people develop their hobbies into entrepreneurship and to develop their skills into businesses. It's not about just getting money. It's about being able to develop other things. So, Mr. President, we have to pay attention to what is it we have. One example, we're completely surrounded by water as an island. So we have the ocean and the sea right around us. And the blue economy comes to mind. This is an opportunity for young people to be able to explore what is around us. Of course, there are some CMOS farmers are already tapping into it. But there are many other very important initiatives that can be accessed because of our mere location as an island. The orange economy, Mr. President, dealing with the creatives, the arts, the culture. I find myself within a ministry that is responsible for the creative industries and culture. And it is very important that we help to develop that particular area, because it is an area that I think as a country we have fallen short of exploring and making use of. There's a lot that we can do through our creatives to showcase what we are and who we are as a people. And that youth economy will help to make linkages between this department and the ministries responsible, like tourism, investment, creative industries, and so on. Mr. President, it is also important to look at the possibilities within the green economy, being able to reduce environmental risks while you set up and develop a business. Use of the concept of recycling of waste. We have a problem with sargassum. We have a problem with plastics. There are young people, I remember during my time as a teacher, as a science teacher, there was what we call the science fair. And young people every year came up with all kinds of ideas that they could use to recycle, to be more climate conscious and resilient. And you know what happens to that? Most of these, they get a little trophy and a nice clap, and some of these concepts find themselves shelved somewhere and never get to be developed. I think that this is an opportunity where a child in school can begin to see how I can use my science fair concept, my science fair project that got a nice trophy and a winning prize, and then look forward to the next 3 or 4 years where I can take that, develop it, get the training, and then the youth economy will help me grow and develop that into a serious business opportunity. So, Mr. President, we are targeting not just youth, as the definition says, between, I think, 13 35, but people even before they've reached 30. Young people in the primary schools, young children who can see, they can have a vision of where they can be because they have an idea and they can grow it over time. And when they are able to access this, that they can develop it into a serious business or entrepreneur for them to make a living. Mr. President, some time ago I was privy to what we had described as the export the runway. And at that exercise, I really was taken aback by what I saw on stage. There were people from Soufrière, Choiseul, Deriso, Rosalie. I saw our cricket superstar, Darren Sammy, and his wife. I saw people showcasing authentic St. Lucian products of quality. All types of accessories and outfits and things I didn't even know existed. I got a real education on what can become part of your clothing accessories at this export showcase. And I was seriously impressed with what ordinary St. Lucians can do. But then you have a showcase, what next? So, and a majority of them, Mr. President, were young people between the ages of 13 and 35, most of them. And they may now be looking for an opportunity to now take this product and go further with it. This is what the youth economy is about. I think we can go back to the expo in Dubai when we speak of the creatives and all the Ampa and the Dennery segments and all of those. What quality that they displayed in Dubai. These people also need an opportunity to help to expand their horizons and reach the world. We have global quality, we have international quality here. Boo Hinkson, if I may mention his name. World class, Mr. President. And I'm happy that some of the young people are now going through a program where they can access his expertise. I commend the Ministry of Culture for that. But I want to say, Mr. President, that this will not exist on its own. There will be the connection between this particular agency and the various departments that young people, commerce, agriculture, creative industries, the business community, that young people can use the skills, the training, and the resources that they can access from the youth economy to be able to channel their energies. Mr. President, sometimes we have to learn how to package what we have. And many times, good things that we can sell are not received well because we didn't package it properly. And I believe that we can achieve that through the training that we can provide young people with. Package your idea, package your product, and then you can sell it to the world. You can sell the identity of your country, the identity of yourself as a St. Lucian, and make an honest living out of it. And I do say an honest living. Too often our young people are led to believe that the only way to make a buck is to do something on the side or do something that is not within the parameters of the law. This is an opportunity to make an honest living, to earn something honestly and properly. Mr. President, some of the incentives that the government is going to be offering upfront, because if you're going to ask young people to take a chance, go for it. You need to be able to give them a little bit of backup. You need to look behind them and know that, look, if I slip, you're there with me. Because they can be a little apprehensive. And I believe one of the support systems that will be in place is offering them incentives, duty and tax exemptions, if some of what they need to do requires importing of products and services. And I do say products and services. Mr. President, the environment for the youth economy to survive or to prosper must be created by this government. It must be an enabling environment. It must allow young people to be able to tap into not only what the grants and the loans may offer, but what is there in the private sector. And I think we have persons in this Senate who are members of the private sector, and they understand the nexus between the private sector and government agencies. That kind of support needs to be available. And so we need to allow young people to see it as an opportunity for them to get the backing of government as well as the private sector for them to be able to not just provide jobs for themselves, but to create wealth and also contribute to nation building. Most of the time, you may want to ask a young man or woman after the age of 20, 30, what has been your contribution to the development of your country? And they may be scratching their heads to figure out, well, I never made a national team, I never had a decent job, but they may very well have had the opportunity to change something in their community or something in their country if that opportunity was granted to them. So, Mr. President, it is important that that message be communicated. One other area that I think the youth economy concept and the youth economy program will also enable is for young people to tap into the e-commerce sector. I did mention earlier during the COVID pandemic that sector grew almost by force. People had no choice. They had to shop online, they had to advertise online. I saw all kinds of things, deliveries and all kinds of new and very welcoming ideas being explored. The youth economy speaks to that. E-business and e-commerce. And for you to be successful there, you must know what you're doing, so you must get the training. So the markets you'll be tapping into are not only local markets, but you can tap into regional and international markets with your product or your service. So, Mr. President, it is important, therefore, that the necessary infrastructure be put in place. Because if you're going to tell young people, look, you can do really well with an e-commerce or e-business concept, they'll have to ask you, but how? Do I have the necessary infrastructure? Do I have the equipment to do so? Some of them may not even have internet access. So things like broadband internet being expanded throughout our island and communities must be looked at. And that was started under the former Minister for Sustainable Development, Jimmy Fletcher, but for some reason, I don't think, the last government followed up, because the wind farm and the solar, I don't want to go too much into that. I'll just say the wind farm in Denver is a good example. Nothing explored there. More interested in garbage and rubbish trucks, whatever happened. But Mr. President, that's for another time. I think that we as a government need to make sure that broadband, internet, and the infrastructure for enabling the e-business and e-commerce concepts be developed. So together with the other departments in this country, infrastructure, sustainable development, education, health, tourism, commerce, that all of these sectors can provide the linkages that we need for the youth economy to succeed. And so, Mr. President, in wrapping up, I want to say that this youth economy concept that the Prime Minister introduced when we started our campaign to get into this last election, I am very happy that it didn't just remain a campaign discussion. That today, 1 year into government, we have done the necessary groundwork, because we couldn't have just come there. And I think there was a discussion, Mr. President, when the opposition found nothing else to say. Why now? Why now? Why after 1 year? As if you come into government and you just start doing things like you're a madman. No. Mr. President, they had a full term to explore it. They didn't. 1 year, we have taken 1 year, a little less than that, to do the groundwork, to have discussion, to scan the environment, find out what are the agencies that will be needed, how do you build the networks, and then we come to the Parliament to enact legislation. Because a lot of things we do in this country are not backed up by legislation. We are enacting legislation to make sure that there is backing, legal backing for what is going to happen. And then we are going to do the programming and the implementation. As I said, Mr. President, there is no quick fix. You may see us come back to this House to make amendments to this bill, as we've done before. And this government is not afraid to say, okay, I think we can revisit this. No, we can do that. And as we go along, we may have to do so. But at least, for now, we are coming to this House and being very decisive and getting the legislation right. At least the first step in getting it right. And then the implementation. I want to just say one word, Mr. President, before I end, to particularly mention the gender issue. Because I'm very gender sensitive. generally you find the female or the women being the ones who always speak up about issues that relate to women. But I think the most influential people in my life have been women, from my mom and others, my grandparents, my aunts, even my own daughter now. So, Mr. President, I'm very, very sensitive to the gender issues. This is an opportunity for our single women, Mr. President. Our single mothers who have to head households and raise children to finally get an opportunity to tap into resources. And we're not going to treat them the way they were labeled and treated by you-know-who. So, Mr. President, I welcome the Department of Gender Affairs, Gender Relations, to rally with us and to work with us in ensuring that there is an equitable distribution of these resources among young people, male, female, single, non-single, aspiring, and everyone, so that when it is rolled out, every single St. Lucian who needs it most will access it. Mr. President, I look forward to the discussion on this. I believe we should have a discussion on it. I look forward to the areas where we can improve. But for now, I submit this bill to this Honorable Senate for its support and its endorsement, because I think we all can agree that it is totally necessary for the improvement of the lives of the people of this country, particularly our young people. I thank you, Mr. President.
Senators, the question is that a youth economy bill be read a second time. Senator Fady.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, from the outset, let me say that we, the senators on the opposition side, we take absolutely no issue with any intention by any administration to initiate activities that are going to ultimately create that economic space for young people to flourish. We have no arguments with that as a general concept. In fact, Mr. President, while we were in office, we attempted and instituted many programs, in fact, at the Ministry of Commerce, for their small business enterprises, of which many young people have benefited. Some $10 million in the financial year 2020 to 2021 was actually instituted by lower member of the House, Honorable Bradley Felix, member for Choiseul, and former Minister of Commerce. In my own experience, we did the same thing in tourism to make available some $10 million. This was a fund that was brought about by the CARICOM Development Fund, and we actually signed a loan agreement with the CDF to institute a program for small tourism businesses at the St. Lucia Development Bank. Now, Mr. President, we did so because we recognized that when we came in 2015, and if you check the Social Economic Review, in 2015, the youth unemployment rate was at 44%. So it meant that while St. Lucia was boasting about economic growth all these years, that there has been a segment of the economy that grew but left the young people of this country significantly behind. So by the year 2016, and you can consult this book if you want me to provide it, but it's in the labor force measurements in the tables in the Social Economic Review. By the year 2019 rather, the youth unemployment rate came down to 31%. As we debate this bill, the youth unemployment rate accounts for some 38% among young people that are unemployed. And so, Mr. President, believe you me, that there's nobody that would be more excited than myself to see any initiative that will help to bring this number down. Now, whether I agree with the approach is a different story. The estimates of revenues and expenditure on page 578 and 579, it details out the youth economy, the numbers as a program. Some 10 million is budgeted in that program, Mr. President. But what I do have a problem with is that some 50% of the total sum is going towards administrative costs, paying salaries, offices. In fact, Mr. President, there's a big number there for consultancy services and commissions. It's a whopping $2.6 million, Mr. President. Now, while I was reading this, I thought to myself that this program should have been renamed the consultancy economy and not the youth economy, because it is clear what the intention is in this program by ensuring that over 25%, over 30% of the monies are going to consultancies. And so you have to wonder, who is the government really trying to target? Is it their friends in the consultancy world, or is it really the young people of this country? Very fundamental question that I look forward to getting the answers from. And you see, traveling and a whole host of other allowances here adding up in the millions, retirement benefits, and a whole lot of admin costs. Now, I can lend the social economic review to the government side if they want to consult it. Now, interestingly, there's already a small enterprise unit called SEDU, which has existed for eons, for decades. And I'm wondering why the government did not go that option to say, well, let's then better fund this entity that we're already paying several civil servants to run, and whether we not give this entity or this unit the leadership that it desires and it needs, and harness the best potential of the civil service, and so that we can ensure that the majority of the $10 million we're putting into this program will actually go to what it really should be doing, not paying consultancies, but really towards ensuring that we finance youth enterprises. Another question. St. Lucia Development Bank. It's a bank, Mr. Speaker, that exists to try to develop the social and economic fabric of this country. It has a very developmental thrust. Its mandate, its approach, its outlook, it's far different from a commercial bank, Mr. Speaker. Another approach could have been that the government says, listen, this is a government-controlled bank. We're going to put the funding here, and we're going to now make these loans and grants available, a mix, a blend, whatever you want, at concessionary terms, so that the young people of this country can have a greater percentage of the monies that we're making available to this program. The core and the fundamental of this, the number one priority should be to ensure that we better finance youth enterprises. Now, I'm not sure about an agency. Why do we need that for? Why is it that you guys like so much red tape and bureaucracy and all that stuff? But we're getting to that. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I want to show you a few other things that is wrong with this legislation. Let's consult, for example, Section 46(1) of the bill. And please go there with me and you will see. It says, Mr. President, that a requirement of the bill is to establish, to be this, B. It says that they must have a micro business for over a year, people applying. Must have a micro business for over 1 year in section 46(1)(b). G says the applicant must have a suitable space to conduct the business. I'm not sure if that's an office, if that's a physical location, or is that an online space. We need more clarity in that regard to really show, because I mean, if this is a small young person that is unemployed, that is starting from bare bones, I'm trying to understand what, and sorry for the confusion, but your government really hasn't done a good job from the onset to properly articulate what is meant by the youth economy. And even by listening to the leader of government business today, I am even more confused as to what this program is attempting to do. So forgive me, please, Mr. President. So when I look at it, the bill says that it says as well, Mr. President, that you must have 20% of the funding. So you get 80%. It doesn't say what is the minimum or the maximum. I'm not sure what is the maximum amount. Can I apply for a business that has a capital outlay of $1 million? I haven't seen any capping of that anywhere in the legislation, but it's for the government to determine what is the cap. Can anyone apply for any amount of monies? And to go back to the issue about the 20% that is required. I mean, here you are giving away flagrantly $2.6 million to consultants. The poor young person who is trying to get up in life, who is trying to free his or herself from poverty, why are you making it so complicated? Why are you putting up all of these roadblocks in the way of what should be a seamless program to help the youth of this country? And this is the questions really that the government side must really answer, Mr. President, because it is really not clear. And so the government must really now give clarity on a number of these issues. So the requirement of the 20% could be found in section 49, subsection D, where the youth are required to pay some 20%. I mean, way too much. Way too much. Come on, right? You are here. You told the youth in the election that you have their backs, that you're going to make the streets of gold, you're going to pave it with gold, and that you're going to make life easier for them. Why so many roadblocks? Why so many requirements? And I know what their response is going to be. They're going to get up and say, oh, well, they've been there for 5 years. Why haven't they done it? And that's the usual cop-out of this administration. They are governing in reverse. They are governing as if the United Workers' Party is still in power, rather than really confronting the problems of this country systematically and calmly and intelligently, and looking at the issues in a comprehensive fashion. They just continue to politicize even their own programs. And so, Mr. President, I'm not convinced that this effort is going to have the desired result. I'm not convinced, Mr. President, that this is going to really move the needle. This is really just a program. It's I guess this is a pilot that the party wishes to test, and maybe later on they're going to build it and put more money into this as we go along. But I'm also concerned about the sustainability of this program, because as we look at the estimates and we look at the summary page, if we consult the summary page, we will see that in the summary page that we have somewhere in the region.
Mr. President, I rise on point of order 36B, elucidation. The member did speak of section 49.
I don't yield to elucidation.
Are you rising on the stand?
Well, on a point of order. Yes, the member.
You're rising on a point of order. When you rise on a point of order, you must state specifically What is it you take the issue with?
Yes, the member is misleading the House. He said under Section 49 that 20% of, well, he referred to some 20%, but we are not seeing that anywhere under Section 49. So,
Honorable Senator.
All right, so you've clarified that.
No, sir. No, we have not clarified. You clarified.
So
You made the statement.
Yes.
Your statement was inaccurate.
No, my statement wasn't inaccurate because what was put out by this administration in the initial bill was 20% is going to be...
Mr. President.
But
They have clarified it. You see, documents are coming to us at the last minute.
honorable member, is it that you're saying that you were provided with an outdated copy of the bill?
No, I'm saying, Mr. President, that the latest copy in my possession had the 25%. The clerk has just informed me that it has since been updated. Now, I am not in the loop.
The question is, honorable member, were you provided with the latest copy?
When was I provided with it? Did you give me a copy?
You address your comments to me. I'm speaking with you.
So, Mr. President,
were you provided with the latest copy?
No, the latest copy that I have, okay? Because in reviewing this bill, you put out this bill, we reviewed it, and what we see, Mr. President, is that the original intent is to have 20%. Now, the clerk...
Honorable member.
That has since been updated.
Honorable member. You do agree that the section or the provision of the bill that you're relying on when you relied on when you made the statement is not current. You agree with that? Do you agree with that? That the section that you rely on is not current?
Mr. President, do you agree with me?
No, I don't have to agree with you.
There has been several documents that has been provided to parliamentarians. Now, here it is.
Honorable member, I'm asking you one simple question. Were you or were you not provided with the latest copy of the bill?
So I'm answering you.
It's a yes or no. I am asking you for a yes or no.
Provide an answer.
Yes or no? Were you provided with a copy of the latest version of the bill?
Mr. President, so what I'll say to you is that documents are going back and forth. This is not the first time it happened in this house, right? The bill which I have in my possession showed very clearly that the microphone working.
Because you're not answering the question.
I am answering you.
I asked you a yes or no question.
So I'm telling you no, because...
Okay, the question is no.
Right, yeah. So,
Honorable Senator, please proceed with your contribution.
So... Okay, so basically now, the clerk has just informed me that the legislation has been updated to suggest that the government has removed its original intent of placing some 20% of the fees which the youth needed to have. So if you've updated it, that's all you need to say.
Honorable Senator, please continue with your presentation.
To make the point and to create the impression in public that somehow I'm trying to mislead the public is actually very disingenuous and unfortunate on the part of the government side. Because I didn't come here to mislead. I can only comment on documents which would have come from your cabinet, prepared by an Attorney General's office, which is managed by you, okay? You then suppliers to the opposition, not always in a timely fashion. Documents come.
Honorable Senator, for the last time. Honorable Senator, for the last time.
Mr. President.
I am very much aware that every member.
Mr. President, it's an important matter.
We have gone through that, and you are frankly, you are really wasting our time. Because if I may add my 2 cents to this, and I don't really normally do that, as the presiding officer of this House, of this chamber, I am very much aware that every single member is provided with the latest edition of any bill or motion to be debated. I am also aware that prior to you arriving here, it was right before you at your desk. And everybody has a copy, of which you as well have a copy. So it is your own omission to review what was before you. And of course, because you were indeed very late. So I note that. So I'm simply telling you, okay, do not go down the road that you're going. Please proceed with your presentation.
Mr. President, I'm very sorry to tell you, okay? If you are expecting that at the drop of a hat that we arrive, in your own words, that I am supposed to realize that a bill that is about 50 or 60 pages, that I am supposed to know that the clause has changed while I'm here sitting and already prepared for my debate today, that's unfair. And I'm very sorry. Anyways, but Mr. President, the other point is that I'm very concerned about the sustainability of this program, in that the government comes forward and they are, so far, everything that I've seen is that this program depends on the consolidated fund for consistent flows of income. Now, I see that the fiscal space is extremely tight when we look at, for example, some of the social and economic indicators in the estimates of revenues and expenditure on the summary page. You would see that, for example, that the deficit is almost 400%. The debt to GDP ratio is somewhere in the region of some 92%. And then when we look at the borrowing, the total projected borrowing, it means that the government would have to borrow some 500 million. So the fiscal space is extremely tight. Now, it would mean that if the fiscal space is this tight, then therefore, what it would mean is that social programs like these are always going to be challenged in order for the government to keep coming up with the resources. What I would like to see is a systematic revolving fund where, for example, that the government is ensuring that this fund sustains itself, rebuilds itself, it is managed so that the concessionary interest terms, for example, could be used in a systematic way to plow back into this so that we can continue funding all the exciting youth programs that we want in this country. But I want to say that this is absolutely critical because the youth of this country, they deserve it. So Mr. President, in a nutshell, we are very concerned with the approach that this government is taking. Too many consultancies, 2.6 million is way too high. The admin cost is extremely high. More bureaucracy that is being put in. There are already existing entities that the government could have used to ensure that they optimize the returns from this project so that the young people can have some $4 million, some $10 million, or as much as the $10 million that have been allocated to this so that they can be in a better position to fund the youth of this country. Finally, it's very unfortunate the way that the opposition continues to be treated in this House. And that's all I'm prepared to say on that. But I will be making a public statement with regards to that. Thank you very much.
Senator Shawley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me bid a pleasant good day to my Senate colleagues and our visitors in the chamber. Mr. President, I stand up this morning to make my submission on the youth economy bill presented to the House for consideration. It would be remiss of me as a youth myself not to add my voice to that bill. Before I go into my submission, Mr. President, I ask that you allow me some leave to, like the leader of government business, and I was very proud of him that he was able to stand here a few chairs down from me. And again, perhaps because of his love for community and love for sports, congratulate the Young Roots football team for having emerged winners of the Deriso Football Club recently completed competition. Let me just add that the Young Roots Football Club is from my constituency of Beaufort North, and that the second place team as well, the Beaufort North Veterans, who also took part in that competition, placed second in that competition. So I want to place on the record my congratulatory remarks to these teams and our thanks for the Deriso League for having invited Beaufort North to participate in that league. And beat them, yes. Mr. President, I also want to place on the record my thanks for persons who continue to engage and to follow the proceedings of the Senate. As a child, I was always very keen to follow the proceedings of the Parliament, but it was always the proceedings of the lower house. So I spent many a summer glued to my TV with my notebook and my dictionary, because many times I could not understand some of the words persons like Honorable Vellans John used. So I sat with my dictionary and my notebook, and for me it was a learning experience. I really learned to grow a greater love for reading and parliamentary procedures and so on, having experienced viewing it. But I was never too keen about Senate proceedings. And I still, in my opinion, find that it may not be the most exciting of the chambers. But as I go around, and last week I had two experiences. I was at two different functions, Mr. President, and persons who I do not know personally walked up to me and had discourse about the proceedings in the Senate and articulated that they actually listen and follow the Senate proceedings. And so this is one to thank them for the words of encouragement that they gave. One lady in particular said to me that no matter where she's in her house, when she hears the president recognizes Senator Shalry, she leaves everything, drops it, and runs to her television. So I just want to say thanks for that. But also to put us in the chamber on alert that St. Lucians here abroad and other persons are following and are listening to what is going on in this honorable house. And so we as senators have a responsibility to ensure that whatever we do, that we do it in a manner that is respectful and in a manner that represents what this august chamber itself represents, Mr. President. I want to also place on record my congratulations for this government on the 1-year anniversary on Tuesday. as well as today also marks the 1-year anniversary of the swearing in of Honorable Philip J. Pierre, and I want to again place on the record my congratulations to him on that achievement. Mr. President, I want to again, just before I go into my presentation, having said or having expressed my desire for us as senators to ensure that we continue to maintain that standard of that level of discourse in the Senate, to encourage my members opposite. I notice it has been almost a habit that at 10 o'clock most of the times we're sitting here waiting for especially the opposition members to join the chamber, and I think they are, in my opinion, doing a disservice to this country, and I want to just encourage them. I do not know what the reasons are, they probably legitimize, but I want to just encourage them that we have a responsibility and we must take it seriously. Just after the proceedings started, I happened to go out into the hallway, and whilst the leader of opposition business should have been seated here and perhaps adding his voice to the first bill that was tabled, he was posturing in front of the media, Mr. President. And I'm not saying that we should not speak to the media, but we need to be mindful that we also have a responsibility to this honorable house, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to, as I begin, touch on a few things that were articulated or uttered by the leader of opposition business. And in terms of the argument, Mr. President, about the perhaps what he deems as disrespect in the way that opposition members are treated and so on, Mr. President, I do not know if he appreciates that when the lower house meets on the Tuesday, which is 1-2 full days before we meet as a Senate, that there may be changes when there are in fact changes that would be made, and then these documents would be sent back to us. As far as my record shows, Mr. President, every member of the Senate received a new copy of the Youth Economy Bill on Wednesday, the 27th of July at 9:01 a.m. And the notation in the email, Mr. President, the notation read, please find the attached Youth Economy Bill. This bill replaces the one previously circulated. And we have to be careful, Mr. President, when we stand in this house to ensure that we represent ourselves in a manner that is true and honest. Mr. President, as I indicated, I am a youth myself, and so of course, from during the campaign and the presentation of the manifesto, the now Prime Minister having spoken very passionately about the creation of the youth economy, I have always really looked forward to the deliberation on that aspect of the economy, Mr. President, and to understand and to see what policies and what programs were being put in place. We are in an era, Mr. President, where the term economy in so many colors, the green economy, the blue economy, the brown economy, the orange economy, Mr. President, and now the youth economy. And the youth economy really looks at how the government or establishing a measure to reduce the gaps between the expectations of the youth, their hopes, their dreams, their realities, and how you can bring all of these things in a very purposeful way that could help the situation that the youth have found themselves in terms of employment, and how you can now give them an incentive and a program, a structure to take themselves out of that situation. And I applaud the government for that gesture, Mr. President. Time and again, this government, Mr. President, proves that they are putting people first, whether it is the youth for the rollout of the youth economy, whether it is the pensioners for increased allocations, whether it's the students, the parents, the elderly for an elderly care program. This government continues to put people first, Mr. President, and I applaud this government for that. The focus for me as it relates to the youth economy and the bill presented before us, Mr. President, is what the establishment of such an agency and a dedicated space for the youth can do to boost the morale of the youth, to give them greater access and to give them greater opportunity. And like the Prime Minister always articulates, Mr. President, the youth economy will give the youth a space to turn their hobbies into entrepreneurship and skills into businesses. And as a young person, Mr. President, every time I hear the Prime Minister speak these specific words, it creates a joy for me that youth will now have an opportunity to do these things, to turn hobbies into entrepreneurship and skills into businesses. Mr. President, I am a certified agro-processor. A cohort of us from the community of VJ, through the VJ Development Committee at the time, got an opportunity to be certified in agro-processing under a program of the then OPSR, which is now TIPA. And Mr. President, I would have loved at the time, so many years ago, I think I was perhaps still at secondary school at the time, I would have loved to have had an avenue and an opportunity to have been able to access the funding, the mentorship and so on that will be available under the youth program, to perhaps have been able to turn my certification into something that would have yielded financial and economic benefit for me and my family and my community, my rural community, Mr. President. And so I very much understand how that program can assist young persons who may have been in the situation I was so many years ago, leaving school from a single family, not being sure whether you could continue schooling because your family does not have the financial support to do that, looking for a job, sending many applications, not sure where to go, and not having the financial backing to start up your own business, even when you've been certified into doing something like agro-processing. Mr. President, again, my focus based on this bill is a dedicated space that will be designed to create employment, opportunities, and ownership for young people. My vision for this agency that is going to be created, guided by this piece of legislation that hopefully will be enacted, is that there is a level of fairness in access, proper dissemination of information, a reduction in the bureaucracy, however not compromising on accountability and transparency, so that every youth in St. Lucia who has a hobby that wants to turn it into entrepreneurship or a skill that needs to turn it into a business will have the same level of access and will not be denied, or will not be, the response will not be determined based on geographical location, political affiliation, family background, or any of these other factors that can cause them not to get access, Mr. President. Mr. President, as I go through this bill and as I listen to the debate in the lower house earlier this week, I could not help but think of the many individuals that I know, persons within my community, persons who I went to school with, my friends, persons who you interact with on a daily basis, who can benefit from what is to be offered under that agency with that piece of legislation, Mr. President. And I think of some persons within my community, cake and treats from Vivacel, a rural community in Bellevue, Mr. President. A young lady who offers some very palatable meals, not necessarily a dedicated space for her to do that, but who really keeps the community together and is able to remove herself from perhaps whatever previous situations and so on, and provide herself with a source of income. Having now an opportunity to have that level of backing, Mr. President, to grow her business, Mr. President, I am very elated at that. I think of Camp Adventure, Jay's Scrumptious Street, and a whole lot of others. Only this morning, Mr. President, a classmate of mine in a social WhatsApp group that we have sent a photo of a lettuce farm, lettuce that are ready to harvest, and asking us if anybody wants to purchase some lettuce, contact me. Mr. President, this piece of legislation and this agency that we are proposing, Mr. President, gives us an opportunity so that persons like that can have the level of support required to move their business from one level to another level, hopefully with the aim to yield better profits, better bottom line, and thus increase the level of the economic situation for individuals, for households, for communities and for our country as a whole. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. President, we saw a lot of small enterprises springing up, small, new ideas, novel ideas that became necessary in the pandemic, Mr. President. We saw many persons started in the production of face masks. We saw many persons started little grocery delivery services, Mr. President. We saw errand runners. We saw a lot of things budding and beginning because of the COVID-19 pandemic. What it tells us, Mr. President, is that there are a lot of ideas on the ground, and there is a great thrust from our young people to take themselves out of what perhaps is the current economic situation, and they want to move themselves from there. But the question is, how do they do that, Mr. President? And as a government, we are proposing to them a way in which they can do that. Mr. President, I just want to read a message that was sent to me some time ago by a young lady. She's a young lady from the community of Viewfort who owns a fishing vessel. Given the situation that the fishing sector has experienced for a couple of years now, she's looking for another avenue. She's a mother, she's very enthusiastic, and she's looking for an additional revenue source. And she sent me a message some time ago to say that it is very hard, and I'm reading almost verbatim here, it is very hard and difficult if you want to start off your own business financially. The banks and credit unions make it so difficult. If you have a young person with an idea, she has a good paying salary and wants to start her own business, the institutions act like the business will fail and they don't really trust it. St. Lucia is a place where dreams fade away. Mr. President, that coming from a young lady in her late 20s, early 30s, who says to me, St. Lucia is a place where dreams fade away. But I, Mr. President, had the opportunity to tell her, don't worry, because I know that the government is working on that piece of legislation to establish a youth economy. And most likely than not, you will now have an opportunity under this program to see your dreams come true. And so I stand there, Mr. President, very proudly today to be part of that debate. Very proudly today to lend my support to this piece of legislation, because I understand too well, Mr. President, what it will do and how it will benefit young persons like Miss Andrea Miller when it comes to the setup of her small business that she has a desire to do, Mr. President. And like the leader of government business indicated, there have been critics, Mr. President. And as a government, we welcome the criticism, because criticism is an avenue to help you grow and to help you better. And the leader of opposition business, Mr. President, he alluded to the fact that this may be a pilot. Of course, things new can be piloted. It's new. There may be scope to change, to tweak, to add, to beef up, to minus. This is really what a pilot is, Mr. President. And so we are not coming here taking the posture that we know it all and we have all the answers magically within a year, Mr. President. This is not the posture of this government. This is a government who understands that things need to be put in place, but we are not purporting to be perfect and we are not purporting to know it all. And so, of course, we welcome the criticism from organizations and from other bodies like the opposition to help build and to help strengthen the legislation that we are presenting. And as I conclude, Mr. President, I cannot help but when I sit in this house and listen sometimes to especially the leader of opposition business say certain things, because I think he seems to be forgetting himself sometimes, who says that and also the leader of opposition in the lower chamber, that this bill is coming to the House 1 year later, but 5-6 years later we were promised bananas to France, who promised reduced gas. The document was already seated on his desk, and it has not been done. But 1 year into this administration, a promise made to the youth of this country, who form a significant part of the electorate, not just in numbers, but in terms of the ability of the youth to move and make things happen in this country. The use of social media, especially, Mr. President, was very prevalent leading up to the last election. It simply says that the youth of this country have a say in what is happening in this country, and to give them that level of opportunity, Mr. President, I applaud the government for it, Mr. President. And so I want to submit my approval for this bill being presented, Mr. President, and I look forward to it being rolled out. I look forward to the agency being set up, like I said, in a manner that is accessible, that our young people will feel comfortable and will be able to, and I will always continue to reiterate the words of the Prime Minister, to be able to turn their hobbies into entrepreneurship and their skills into businesses, because I think this is something that is very much needed in St. Lucia, especially given, I think we understand very well the external shocks that we've been experiencing. But if we can encourage our youth, give them an opportunity to start their own businesses, Mr. President, I think it will lend to that level of resilience that we require as a country, so that we can create a buffer when these external shocks hit our doors, Mr. President. And so I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to submit on this bill before us, Mr. President. I thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few remarks on this bill. Permit me, Mr. President, to begin my comments on this bill by mentioning a young man that I've had the privilege to get to know during his time at my alma mater, St. Mary's College. I like to mention it anytime I get a chance. Mr. Shaquin Prudent, who has recently graduated and moved on to another facility, is a gentleman that, when I think of, gives me great hope for the future. He was an outstanding academic student while at SMC and has continued at Sir Arthur. He's a national athlete. In fact, he's currently engaged in the Free Kick Foundation tournament. His team has now won 2 games, and we're looking hopefully to make it towards the finals on the weekend. He has also found time, despite being engaged in all these things, to mentor other students and become an entrepreneur. He started his own business whilst at school. And I mention him because he's exceptional, but fortunately for St. Lucia, he's not unique. There are a number of young persons doing really extraordinary things in St. Lucia. With or without the assistance of government and industries and agencies, they found a way. And so it is commendable that there's an effort to focus attention on the youth and to focus resources on their development and growth. But that being said, Mr. President, the creation of a youth economy agency and a youth economy program, to my mind, assumes that there's a raw material already in place to be shaped and formed into successful youth entrepreneurs. And I raise this issue because, to me, fundamental in this is that we have to look at this as part of a whole. We can't just take persons at the end of the spectrum and say, okay, we'll help them work. We need to make sure that there's a continuum of persons coming through our education system who are business savvy, who understand the nature of operating a business, who have the necessary skills, the raw talent and skills that can then be shaped by mentorship and training and funding that the youth youth economy agency is hoping to bring to bear. I have listened to the presentations thus far, and what does come to mind to some extent, Mr. President, is that we do have a tendency in St. Lucia to look at the new shiny thing. And oftentimes we neglect what has gone on in the past. We don't learn from the mistakes that we've made, and we continue to make them. I'm saying that in the hopes and with the honest goodwill that this agency does not perhaps follow the trend that has happened in some cases. And in particular, I remember the Youth Enterprise Fund, which was started with great fanfare, the idea being largely to do a lot of the things that is being done by this Youth Enterprise Agency, particularly to provide funding, seed funding for entrepreneurs. And yet, I think approximately 10 years after its funding, I think $5 million was allocated to it. Only $500,000 or thereabouts has been advanced. I think only about 10 businesses have been financed, and of which only one is currently operating. And if that is the matrix or the metric, that we are aiming towards, we have serious problems. So I commend the idea, but we need to make sure, again, the devil is always in the details, and perhaps always in the operationalization of these plans. The leader of opposition business mentioned a number of agencies that are already in existence, and I did question myself when I read through the bill, how exactly is there going to be an interrelation between the Youth Economy Agency being created and these existing? So NSDC, for example, the SLDB, how are those existing resources going to be tapped into and linked to this agency? I understand that you can't articulate everything in a piece of legislation, but I would have hoped, at least in the presentations from the government side, that a firmer understanding of how this agency is going to relate to what exists already would have been put forward. I would hate to have a situation where we are either replicating or creating this standalone entity that does not harness the experiences, does not harness the skills, does not harness the resources that already exist and are available to us. Again, reflecting on the experiences we had, and the leader of government business mentioned it. In the past, we had a number of science fairs, for example. And I must commend the teachers who continually inspire their students, because a lot of really, really interesting products were showcased at these science fairs. And the question is always, what next? How do we tie the interests of the youth that exist, or the interests of the youth from that level into becoming viable businesses and viable contributors to the development and economy of St. Lucia? And so I would like to again encourage the government to think about the redevelopment of our education system, so we can begin to look at perhaps centers of excellence, where we look at, I noticed the schedule, and I'll get to that shortly, lists a number of areas. So we have sports, we have entertainment, we have design, we have technology, but we need to start ensuring that our education system, in addition to dealing generally with the issues of business, how you form a business, how you run a business, how you develop a business plan, allows for the development of centers of excellence for these various industries, so to speak. I listened to a speech by Dave Chappelle. I'm sure most of us are familiar with him, a very well-known US comedian. And he was speaking on the occasion of the renaming of the theater of the Duke Ellington School for the Performing Arts, which he attended. And what came across to me and was very, very clear in his speech was that a lot of his success is down to the fact that he went to a specialized school that enabled him to interact with other persons who were similarly minded, and perhaps who were able to challenge him on the basis of his art, because they understood, they spoke that common language, and it enabled him to thrive in a manner which he would not have thrived, and he made that very clear, had he continued in the public school system in the US. Now, I know we don't have the resources necessarily to ensure that we can develop such widespread centers of excellence, but I think in our education system we can still begin to develop programs where, if a student is interested in music, for example, that can be the focus of his educational experience, where he knows there's sufficient classes and programs available to him where he can develop as a musician. Similarly with drama, with art, with literature, similarly with computer-aided design, developing of apps and programs and programming. We need to move past the idea where we sort of scattershot and let persons, I'm not saying that there isn't a value in having a wide experience as possible, But at the same time, there is equal value in ensuring that persons who have the talent and the ability are met with other persons who have the similar talent, ability, and drive, where they can push each other to the level of excellence. It is with not by accident, for example, that we always pride ourselves on having 2 Nobel laureates. And yes, their foundations were shaped in St. Lucia, but in both cases, they had to go on to other places where they could meet and compete or work with persons who were similarly minded with them and who could push and challenge them. Too often, unless you are really, really driven, you will tend to operate only at the level to which you are exposed and the level at which you are required to, which is why in some cases you have students who perform brilliantly when they're by themselves. There's a big fish in a small pond, but even then they don't meet the extreme of their possibilities or the maximum of their possibilities because they're not challenged to that extreme. So I would like to encourage the government to not just look at one end of the spectrum and say, okay, we've created an avenue and pat themselves on the back for that, but they need to make sure that they put in place on the other end of the continuum policies and resources to ensure that you are creating that chain or continuum of persons who can come through and continually succeed. I want to look at the bill in particular, and there's a few comments that I had on some of the sections. One of the concerns I had, Mr. President, begins in the interpretation section, where we've defined activity. And when you go to the schedule, it lists 13 areas. I'm not sure exactly what the thinking was behind listing specific areas that can be accommodated under the youth economy. And to some extent, respectfully, I think that is counterproductive, because it assumes that we who are around this table somehow know and understand exactly what the youth may be interested in and where the next great idea may be coming from. The fact is, a few years ago, nobody would have known what Instagram was and how big a role social media would have played. And if we were at the time trying to develop a program, we would have ignored these sorts of things. I believe we should not be limiting the activities that should be covered by this bill in any way. We've already decided to delimit it by virtue of youth, which means persons like myself can't get a part of this. But I think once you meet that age requirement and once on an evaluation, your idea, your business is viable, regardless of where it comes from, it should be accommodated. For example, just off the top of my head, what if I want to be a joiner? I love making furniture. Now, unless you're going to say that furniture somehow comes under designing, it's not going to be covered. But that is still a young person who may very well become, and furniture is very expensive. I think, again, if I had to do things over, perhaps I might have decided to go that route. And I'm sure any of us who's had to build a house recently and pay for the cost of cabinetry understands just exactly how well a well-funded and well-disciplined and organized joiner can be. So again, I think we are leaving out areas, and we should not be, at this moment, be excluding anybody who is young, has a viable idea, falls within the other categories or the other requirements, for support. I also had a concern, so that's section 1. I also had a concern, Mr. President, with regard to section 36. Again, this is just a general concern I always sort of have when I look at these bills. And I noticed that the employees of the agency somehow require the approval of the minister. Now, I'm not sure whether that is just a general, you can go ahead and employ persons, or whether there is a situation where the minister has to vet and approve appointments before they happen. And if the latter is the case, the question obviously then is why. I don't understand why a minister would have to get involved in the nitty-gritty of the operationalization of an agency. I can understand the policy direction, I can understand appointing the board, but to my mind, if we are creating an independent body who is responsible for their activities and responsible to Parliament, I don't see why the minister has to get involved in the employment of the staff of the agency. Similarly, I also have a concern, Mr. President, with Section 37, which deals with the oath of secrecy and confidentiality, and particular Section 2, subsection 2, which provides that, again, persons are supposed to keep confidential the business of the agency, the affairs of a member of the board or an employee of the agency, but yet still, for some reason, fails to mention the affairs of the persons applying to the agency. Seeing as the agency is required to evaluate and consider business plans, the financials of these persons who are applying, I believe that an amendment needs to be made to this section to include the information supplied by the applicants having to be kept confidential as well. Section 40, and I'm asking for perhaps some explanation and understanding here from the government side. My understanding is that part of the function and one of the things that's been touted as the benefit of this organization is the fact that it can provide seed funding for the businesses that apply to it. However, when I read Management of Finances and Application of Revenue, which is Section 40, I don't see any specific reference to provision of loans or seed funding, or what's the definition in the, or the definition, sorry, the definition section speaks to finance, which then speaks to finance for the purchase of equipment, refurbishment of equipment, provision of working capital. But as I said, I don't see any specific reference to that in the legislation. If expenses is considered to cover all of that, that is fine, but I still believe perhaps there needs to be specific reference so that there's no ambiguity as to the fact that the revenue of this organization can be used to finance the youth enterprises. I also have a query as to subsection C, subsection C of Section 40, as to why the cap of 20%. I believe the concern has always been voiced as regards this organization as to how much resources are actually going to be put into supporting the businesses. And to my mind, 20%, if, again, as I said, this is to cover all your expenses, including funding of the businesses that are applying to it, is somewhat concerning, because 20% is a minor sum in comparison. No, sorry. This is the cap on what the revenue can be expended on. This is Section 40. Sorry, Mr. President, through you. Again, with regard to Section 46 and the requirements for an application for the Youth Economy Program, I noted at this 46, I believe, F, 46(1)(f), I believe. Yes, F is correct. That the business site is adequate and suitable for the activity. Again, I think perhaps we are missing an opportunity here. One of the reasons that they may be seeking assistance is in finding an adequate site. And so I believe that a business incubator really and truly should be an essential part of this youth enterprise program. That there should be some resource made available to persons where they can come in as part of this program and get suitable and adequate housing, for want of a better, or adequate location, particularly if the nature of the business is service oriented. And I think if we house the program in a place that can also accommodate an incubator, you will get greater synergies, because you can better monitor the activities of those enterprises. and be on hand to grant them and give them support and assistance when they most require it. So I think making it a prerequisite that they have an adequate business site is, again, an unnecessary limit that may restrict the benefit that we can get from this program. So I think we need to think a little bigger, perhaps, and be a little bit more proactive with regard to that. I also had a question as regards 46(1)(b), which creates the requirement that you either have been operating it for a year or beginning to operate it. So what happens in the interim? If I'm 6 months in, why should that, again, disqualify me? You know, what magically would have happened between not having a business at all and having the business operating for a year? To me, the issues of viability can be assessed on the financials of the business, and once I put forward the financials of the business and you look at it as part of the evaluation, I should be accommodated, whether I'm just starting out or whether I'm 6 months in, whether I'm 2 months in, whether I'm 8 months in. I believe, again, we are creating an unnecessary restriction with that regard. And so, Mr. President, I would like to encourage the government. Oh, and before I move on, sorry. Again, the comment was made during the debate on the estimates of revenue and expenditure as regards the split of the monies, where almost 50% of the monies allocated, of the $10 million allocated towards this program, is going towards consultancy, going towards accommodation, going towards salaries. Again, if it is because this is the first year and the initial expenses, I can understand that. That was not necessarily made clear, and I would invite the leader of government business to perhaps give us a further explanation on why the split was made in that way and what will be accommodated. And again, I would be more comfortable with that if the accommodation cost included an incubator where persons who require space can find that space. And again, it would be a source of revenue because you can rent out the space to the young businessmen who are seeking the assistance of this program. So, in conclusion, Mr. President, I am willing to give this program my support and, for want of a better word, the benefit of the doubt to see how it plays out, how it operationalizes, how it benefits or creates opportunity for our young persons. I understand that success will not be achieved overnight, but I would like to encourage again the government side to keep us regularly updated on the process by which this particular piece of legislation is being put into effect and the outcomes from it, how it is benefiting our young persons. Because I think we've all agreed that youth unemployment is significant in St. Lucia, and that at the same time, the youth is really where the energy and the drive to continue the development and growth of St. Lucia has to come. So we have to make sure we support the youth. We have to make sure we put in place, and I applaud the fact that they are being singled out and an effort is being made to recognize, because messages are important, and the fact that it's recognizing that the youth are an essential part of our economic development is to be commended. And so I await what happens going forward. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senators, the question is that the youth economy bill be read. Oh, my Senator Aziz.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good day to my fellow colleague senators. It gives me great pleasure this morning to add my voice to the overwhelming landslide of support that I sense for the youth economy bill. I must compliment and extend compliments to the architects of the bill and to the Prime Minister for his unwavering support and championship of this relatively new and paradigm-shifting concept of a youth economy. Personally, I have reached out to the permanent secretary under whose responsibility this design and these efforts were organized, and in the two discussions that I've had with him, I must say that I'm very encouraged with the speed with which they have been able to undertake the framing of this bill and the passion that is enshrined in it. I'd like to also echo that this whole discussion on youth unemployment and the challenges and issues which are facing our youth is not unique to us here in St. Lucia. It also washes the shores of a number of Caribbean islands as well as internationally. And if you were to take a look at some of the reports coming out by UNICEF and the United Nations and the ILO post-2020, you will see that youth unemployment and the challenges ravaging the youth, it's global in nature. And we really can't take any ownership for those issues. It's not unique to us. It's a global issue. What we can take credit for, however, are the solutions. We can take credit for unique solutions that we as a country can own and implement and use as a best practice globally for the rest of the world to share with other countries. And I am hopeful that the Youth Economy Agency will serve as one of these shining best practices as a result of its accomplishments that we can take to the world and say, listen, we got it right here in St. Lucia. But to get it right, Mr. President, would mean that we must be prepared to make radical change. We must be prepared as a country to be very dramatic and to pursue radical reformation of systems and processes that demonstrate how committed we are to the success of our youth. Because if we were to take credit for what currently exists and juxtapose it against the ills and the issues that we're facing, we cannot avoid the fact that something is not connecting. Something is not connecting when we see the large droves of our young people after school is finished, on the streets engaging in all sorts of behavior that many parents would not be proud of. We know something is not right when we see the levels of violence and the heinous crimes being committed. And we know that it means that we've got to revisit the drawing board and ask ourselves, is what we're doing and is what we've done connecting with the unique demands of the youth that we have today? Decades of miscalculation, a risk-averse mindset, and perhaps in many instances, selfishness is starting to catch up with us. And I put to you, Mr. President, that we are not adapting and changing as quickly as we need to meet the demands of our young people. I hope that the Youth Economy and the Youth Economy Agency represents that paradigm-shifting change that we need. And what are some of the things that make the demands of the young generation and the youth today different? Well, studies put forward that they are more technologically savvy, and anything that they're involved in has to have an element of technology enshrined in it. They've got a more enterprising mindset. They're not interested in the 15-year careers. They're not interested in being lifelong servants. They're not interested in simply doing one thing. They've got a penchant for change and excitement, and it lends that mindset to a lot of innovation and creative things. But are we adapting our business systems and our economy to accommodate them? We speak a lot about what we've done and the various agencies which have been established to support and develop our young people and to provide opportunities for them. But I can't honestly say that personally I am super impressed with them. Senator Lee referenced one example. I know that there are others, because it has to break your heart when you've made an allocation of millions of dollars that is supposed to plug into and finance the promises of our youth for a better tomorrow, and have to retire those funds at the end of the year because you have been too risk averse, because your systems are polluted with bureaucracy, because the demands that you make on our young people to access these financing, because they don't have a net in and a power, or they don't have some sort of backup, their dreams are lost and expire. Because as a system, we are so risk averse, and we've got to manage that kind of risk. This is what causes us as a people and a country to fail our youth. And when we continue to fail them time after time, agency after agency, when the home structures start to decay, not because of single parents at all, but because of the quality of parenting, when that starts to decay, and then the education system now starts to decay because it cannot catch those who drift because it is too prescriptive in its approach of how things should be done. And then in comes something like a pandemic and creates a wider gap, and our youth lose faith in other layers of decision makers because they feel that they're put upon. When we use terms like consultation loosely, but the final product does not capture the contributions of our young people and doesn't feed into what it is that they want, we build and fuel frustration, depression, and hopelessness. And that gives rise to a lot of the ills that we're seeing today, driven by that hopelessness. If we continue to be unwilling to take risks on our youth, if we do not look at the failure of some of our systems and make the necessary change to support our youth, then naturally we are telling them that we are unwilling to invest in their failures. Like we're some sort of shining example of a failed less life. Like each one of us here have not made mistakes. Like the Fortune 500 companies and the multimillionaires and the movers and shakers of our economy globally, regionally, internationally, like they have not made mistakes of their own, right? But we focus on their success, but it feels sometimes like our systems are designed to punish our youth for failing even before they start. So you must hit this checklist of 200 things before you can even get off the ground. When we should be focused more on financing and supporting those dreams and aspirations, and be prepared to pick them up when they fail. We have to be willing to invest in the failure of our youth. Because you tell me about $500,000 expense to support 10 companies, one succeeded. Suppose we had expensed that entire $5 million. You do the odds, look at how many more successes we would have had. But because we are so focused on making sure that we as an institution show a great slate, show a great card, our youth are punished. The Youth Economy and the Youth Economy Agency, I know, is not going to be operating in a vacuum. It is not going to be operating in a vacuum. Best practice suggests that it's got to connect and network for success. But it also means that as a country, that alone will not address the issues of our youth. We also have to look at how we create the wider infrastructure to give them the success. We want to support young people and encourage those aspirations for them to be influencers online. How we equip our communities to provide free Wi-Fi and dependable technology to get them there. We want to encourage those who maybe have an inclination to, maybe coding or programming or gaming, for example. Are our HRDC facilities around the island equipped to encourage and nurture these kids to move from good to great? That is the kind of infrastructure that is needed. What I would like to do, Mr. President, to impress upon the management of this new agency is to operate with a sense of commercial urgency. There's a running joke of how many consultants does it take to change a light bulb. First of all, can we get a consultant to define a light bulb? When we've reached that stage, how many consultants do we need to analyze what type of light bulb we need? And we sit down and we're trying to get it great, trying to get it perfect. And you know what? Our youth are drifting every single day. Yeah? I have no issues with the allocations that ensure that we have the best possible framework for success. I have no issues with consulting the best minds to ensure that we build a proper foundation for success. What I am saying is that the allocations which are available to finance the youth, do not stagnate it, do not cripple it, do not hold it back simply because of bureaucracies. I would also like to reemphasize, my understanding is that this agency is not a bank. And that means it has a level of obligation to support the aspirations of our youth outside of that type of banking bureaucratic framework. And by not being a bank and being an agency that is committed, charged, and committed to develop, to grow, nurture, inspire, and to support our youth, make sure you keep the private sector near and dear to you, so that we can build those linkages to optimize the success of these brilliant ideas, and not only that, access the skill sets we need to train them. As a country at the crossroads that we are currently at, we must be prepared to risk everything on the aspirations of our youth. Our future depends on it. We say that very often, but we don't behave like that. Our systems don't give the youth the flexibility, the wiggle room, and the liberties to do that. But yet still, all of us in this house are planning to retire in an environment in which the youth are going to have to govern. If we don't do things right, it will come back to haunt us. It can't be it's not sensible to me that if I want to invest in a depreciating asset or in an investment, make an investment in something that depreciates, it's so much easier to access financing. But when I want to do something that can appreciate and invest in a mortgage or whatever, here's 200 things that you must do. There's the checklist that you must do. And you really expect a mindset of a millennial to be amenable to that concept? They're looking at us as failures. That has failed, so why would they want to be? They want that same imposed on us. I think one of the senators said earlier, no bureaucracy. However, we will ensure that we do not compromise on transparency and accountability. No one's asking. It does not have to, you don't have to give up one for the other, right? Transparency and accountability, that's a given. We want that. We want to be informed of the progress and what's going on in the house. However, we're saying that thick bureaucracy fails, suffocates, and frustrates our young people. Mr. President, I close by saying that it is my wish that this agency that is birthed through this legislation prioritizes trust over performance, Do things that sends a message to our youth that we trust your dreams, we trust your aspirations, and I'm not going to punish you or punish your performance by guessing that because you don't have 6 out of the 7 things that you're doomed to failure. Let us commit to prioritizing trust over performance and exercise that at the heart of the decisions we make when we consider those applications. Mr. President, thank you.
Senator Shawa here.
Thank you, Mr. President, and pleasant good afternoon to all. Mr. President, after that very passionate and moving presentation by Senator Aziz, I wonder how much more I can add, but it would be remiss of me, of course as a young person, to not lend my voice to a bill that I have waited sufficient time for its passing. And I just wanted to highlight a few things that have been said. But first, through you, Mr. President, if you would permit me to congratulate Honorable Philip J. Pierre. It was exactly 1 year ago today where he was sworn in as Prime Minister of St. Lucia. And I remember getting that call to host his swearing-in ceremony, and I was shaking. Me? Why me? But I know that our Prime Minister has always believed in the capabilities and the abilities of our young people. And even at a tender age, he appointed me as an opposition senator. And of course, it is because of his confidence I am here on this side as a government senator. So I want to take this opportunity to thank him and of course his government for a successful 1 year in office. Mr. President, I wanted to first make note of a few things that came up from the discussion. And I do know that it is all of our intention to ensure that our future generation has the opportunity and the resources so they can thrive. I know for a lot of young persons today, they did not have those opportunities. And like Senator Ferdinand said, even for me, maybe if I knew of the Youth Economy Agency a couple years ago, maybe I would have been in a different setting if my parents knew of it. I remember my dad having to walk all the way from Forestier to Castries as a security officer 30 years later. My mom as a seamstress 30-something years later. And they would have loved an opportunity to be able to go to an agency that focuses on their talents and their skills and help direct it into sustainable enterprise. One thing that came out of the discussion a few moments ago was the difference with existing entities and what we are trying to do here today. Mr. President, it is my understanding that some of these entities, their mandate does not allow them to focus on a variety of issues. So for example, NSDC, as far as I know, their mandate is not to provide funding or financial support, but to develop skills. The St. Lucia Development Bank, I know their mandate is to provide financing, and of course you have to go through the checklist and, as you might argue, the bureaucracy of it all to be able to get to a place where you can get support. But the Youth Economy Agency, this is something that Prime Minister, well, the political leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party campaigned on heavily. It was the flagship program of the SLP, and it is my honor and privilege to stand here today to speak on it. Why? Because the St. Lucia Labour Party, everything that this administration has done or continues to do in some way or the other is for the future, is for our young people. And this bill speaks of our confidence and in the abilities of our young people. Now, the leader of the opposition business spoke about consultancies. Just like Senator Aziz, I have absolutely no issue with these consultancies. The issues that we had with consultancies was paying accounting firms to do our budget, 35 million, or correct me if I'm incorrect on the exact amount. on paying somebody to come and reevaluate our sports facilities. Millions. When we have skilled and capable people right here in this country who can do that. So to argue about consultancies which will ensure that the amount of stakeholder engagement will be done, that we ensure that we may not always get it right because it can be termed as a pilot, but we must do what we can to be transparent and be held accountable to know that this will function as it should. And Senator Deal did state that he would not like to see that this is another agency that is swept under the table. There has been an allocation for it. The Prime Minister spoke of the $10 million allocation for the youth economy. And of course, it is something that we will constantly have to review and debate on. So, Mr. President, I wanted to, first of all, establish the difference of the youth economy and existing agencies. Under Section 46 of the bill, a point was brought up, 46B. A young person may make an application to the board to access the youth economy program if the young person B is operating a micro business enterprise for at least 1 year or intends to operate a micro business enterprise. And I can understand why there is a request for a bit more clarification. But if I can just explain, you can imagine that if you're saying for at least 1 year or intends to operate, this would refer to the level of support that will be allocated. So for example, if you have already been in operation, you may not need support that is startup capital, but you would need support to continue so your business can thrive. But if you are a new entity, you may need startup capital. So this is simply referring to the level of support that the youth economy will provide. But of course, I do agree that we can, of course, look at the wording and tweak it a bit. If we look at F under the same section 46, a young person may make an application to the board to access the youth economy program if the young person has a business site that is adequate and suitable for an activity. Mr. President, we know with the onset of COVID-19, a lot of small businesses sprung up out of nowhere. People have been working from home, working from their kitchens to sell their food, and so business sites may not necessarily refer to an office space in Castries or in Grosley, but it can simply be your computer, your office, or even your kitchen. I wanted to just clarify that. Mr. President, I won't go too much into what the leader of opposition said about not receiving the information, but I just wanted to state very briefly through you that there are a lot of young people who work in the House of Parliament. And if I may say, arguably, they are one of the most competent set of young people you can find. So we should not be trying to leave any doubt in their minds that they are not doing their work. We all received the paper, the adjustments from Tuesday's sitting. Wednesday, we got it via email. And of course, it was all on our desk. So I just wanted to add that we really appreciate the work of the House of Parliament, especially our young people, and really want to encourage them because they are doing as much as they possibly can. So, Mr. President, going into the bill and why this is so important. Well, why did we get here? And Senator Aziz did speak a lot about working with our youth, our at-risk youth, and believing in our young people and giving them a second chance. And as I said earlier, almost every single thing that this administration has done or has come into this House for over the last year has been impacting our young people. Even when we expunged the criminal records of young persons who carried or who had cannabis in their possession, 30 grams or less. These are simple examples of why we are deciding that we need to believe in our young people and we need to give them a second chance. So the youth economy speaks of transferring the skills and enterprise, harnessing the skills of our young people into sustainable enterprise. And the components of the Youth Economy Agency will really target four specific areas. One, marketing. even as I spoke of these social media businesses that sprung up, you find a lot of young people, they want to do the graphics themselves, they want to do the social media themselves, they have to do the accounting, they have to go out there and sell it, and they may not be skilled in all of these areas to do so. So when the government decided that a critical part of the Youth Economy Agency was to provide training, I believe that this component is absolutely necessary. The next part, well, training and marketing support. The next part is mentorship. A lot of grown folk who heard about the Youth Economy Bill said to me, well, what is in it for me? But the Youth Economy Bill is about all of us. It will change the lives of all of us. The grown person who is involved in the fashion sector, who is mentoring our future generation to be able to walk the runway and export their goods, they are involved in the youth economy. The individuals who have gone through, Mr. Aziz, I know, is an expert in tourism. Maybe persons like Mr. Aziz will be incorporated into this to provide trainings to young people in the hospitality and the tourism sector. So it doesn't at all exclude the involvement of persons with experience, but of course it will form this link between the young and the experience so we can all work together in ensuring that this agency thrives. And the most important part, one might say, is easier access to finance, loans, and grants. Mr. President, we know of the bureaucracy. When I left Sir Arthur and I had this idea, I was not working for 2 years. The banks require that you have a credit line or you've been banking with them at least for 2 years. But you're coming out of SAFA, you're coming out of a secondary school, and you don't have that. But what often happens is somebody with the capital would have picked up that idea and may be able to run with it. And of course, the dreams of our young people are killed. This provides easier access to finance. And I think this is a critical component. There is a note in the bill which states that a certain amount cannot be exceeded. But Mr. President, if somebody can come, walk into the Youth Economy Agency and say, I have this idea, I need assistance with marketing, I need assistance with my business plan, and I need maybe $5,000 to at least start up without having to go through the red tape of going to a bank, they can get easier access to that. And that is the main difference between the Youth Economy Agency and, of course, maybe the SLDB, where you would still need to have somebody to guarantee your loan or still have somebody to be able to speak on your behalf. Mr. President, I also noted towards the end of the bill some additional concessions that are provided for persons who would like to benefit or who are interested in benefiting from the youth economy. And it reads 100% waiver on custom duty imports, 100% waiver on items that increase on the use of alternative energy, 100% waiver on VATs, building materials, etc. And of course, 100% waiver on corporation tax. I think these things are extremely important to be able to tell our young people that we are doing more than just say we can give you easier startup to finance, that if you need to order, and we know most of these things you cannot find in St. Lucia, that you can apply and you can be guaranteed those concessions. So, Mr. President, I just wanted to highlight those few things. I know a lot has been said about the youth economy. Almost every time we come to this house as a representative for young persons, I have shared my voice on it. But I really want to take this opportunity to remind all of us that we are doing it for ourselves, for our children, and of course for our children's children. And I do hope that the remaining members or member of the opposition can see the value in us understanding that we may not have it 100% correct, and I do agree that some of the points that Senator Lee made need to be considered, but together we are here for us to ensure that we get it right. And if we invest in our young people, we show them that we have trust and confidence in them, Mr. President, we cannot go wrong. Too many times we have been very hard on our young people. Too many times we have looked at them and said, no, you cannot do it. Too many times we have employed a top-down approach. And our Prime Minister has always said, we are taking a bottom-up approach this time around. You tell us what it is that you want to do, and we will provide the resources for you to be able to accomplish your dreams and to reach your desires. So with this, Mr. President, I submit, and I want to congratulate this government on finally bringing this very remarkable, this crowning moment to their one-year anniversary achievements, to state that I fully support this youth economy agency. Thank you.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, first of all, I want to thank the members of this chamber who contributed to the bill. And I also want to assure them that, like I said when I attempted to explain the contents of the bill, that it may very well come back to this Senate for amendments and for improvement. That was established from the onset. And so it came as no surprise to us that some of the comments and observations made are to be considered and are welcome. I will attempt to address a few of them, and some of them may have to be considered for further discussion. Let me first of all get out of the way some of the issues that were raised by the Leader of Opposition Business. Sometimes, Mr. President, it's not what you do, but it's how you do it. And as we noted, there was a particular observation that was raised by the Leader of Opposition Business. Again, I speak to an empty chair. It's been a pattern in the last few sittings that every time I attempt to respond to his, claims or his questions, that I'm speaking to an empty chair, so I don't know if I should. But for the benefit of the opposition, and I do respect that there is an opposition, and at least there is a member of the opposition sitting, so he can convey the message to him that we are trying to respond. Mr. President, as I was saying, it's not what you do, but how you do it. There was a particular issue that was raised, and it was also raised by Senator Lee, regarding the agency and the financing. And I think it was a legitimate point. But by the time the Leader of Opposition Business got to that point, he had muddied the waters so much that he got lost in the discussion, and it became an issue of him attempting to have an exchange with you and everybody else. But Mr. President, let me try to extract the content of the issue. Of course, I think he was trying to make reference to the 20%. But instead of going to the correct section as Senator Lee did, he went to a section that he tried to insert, which is 46, and 49, sorry, and that was incorrect. And I don't think he has learned because, again, because of his absence, he was not able to actually make the relevant section. And I think it was disingenuous of him. However, the issue of the 20% and where it should have been where it should go, I believe that it is more a matter of what is happening because of the initial introduction of the agency and the initial introduction of the whole concept. Some of the expenses incurred, and I'll get to that a little later, at this particular time will not necessarily be incurred as the program is rolled out over the next few years. And I think Senator Lee almost pointed out to it. I think he asked almost in a form of a question whether that is because of the initial setup. And I'll get to that shortly. But just to complete my response to the Leader of Opposition Business, when it's not, we did so, our government had done so, the other thing that he would try to do is to find something that is not necessarily in the bill to comment on. So when he couldn't find anything to comment on, he tried to create his own argument by inserting or attempting to insert something, and thankfully my colleague senator was able to point it out. Mr. President, one thing that I noted, there was an attempt to talk about consultancies, not in the way that the independent senator raised it, to suggest that we should not concentrate too much of the funding on services and consultancies, but in the way that he tried to exaggerate the services that we are bringing into this program. I think it's because he himself, he knows what consultancies means to him. Consultancy in our context is a completely different concept, because I just want to draw the example. I don't know if he was thinking about Ernst & Young. You know, I don't know if at the time he was talking about the consultancies in this program, that he was reflecting on Ernst & Young, who was paid, what, $15 million? 15 million? To do something that our budget department can do. And I can say, Mr. President, the $15 million that we had paid, can you imagine what that $15 million could have done for the youth economy? It is 150%. In fact, it is 150% of the entire budget that we have allocated for the youth economy. It's $10 million. And 15, we could have had an extra 5 million, 50% more. And you come here. I mean, I have no problems with an observation about saying, okay, let us not try to spend too much of the money on anything else but the youth. I accept. I accept. And when I get to the comments by Senator Lee, I will respond. But in the context that he tried to raise it, coming from the leader of opposition business, who sat in a cabinet for 5 years and allowed and did not have a problem with a consultancy of a single consultancy of $15 million. I don't want to go into all the others because I have promised myself, Mr. President, that I will not come to stand up in the Senate to try to rehash everything the government of the previous government did. But from time to time, I need to do a little bit of a gentle reminder. I need to do that. Because I do not think that the leader of opposition business has any moral authority to speak about consultancies in this honorable chamber. None. So I have no issue with the message in that regard, but I have an issue with the messenger. So, Mr. President, if I may now try to respond to some of the very legitimate comments that were raised by other members in this chamber. I believe that all of us here mean well, and we want to see that this youth economy concept works. And we cannot pretend that everything about the bill coming here for the first time is perfect. Unlike other bills that we would have brought in that were amendments where there existing legislation, we accept that this is a new piece of legislation. This is the first time it's come into the House. How would we not expect for it to have areas that we can improve on? Of course, we are very much aware of that, and we're very open to revisiting the bill. But for the purposes of its initial introduction into the House, we have to move and we have to come with something that we will try our best to make sure by the time this thing is properly implemented, we would have fixed and adjusted and amended and improved. So with all good intentions, I believe some of the comments that were made are legitimate, and I will seek to now turn my attention to some of Senator Lee's comments. Now, we must understand, Mr. President, sometimes some of us in this honorable chamber do have some advantages in certain areas of our expert knowledge and experience, and it's good that we can bring it to focus on the discussion. I commend that, and I accept it, whether it is in law, in education, in business, and well, I do not appreciate some of the experiences that people try to bear in trying to mislead the House. This is one of those I do not like, and I do not think is right, to try to insert something that was not there. That is not what I'm speaking of. I'm speaking of expert knowledge experience, and legitimate intentions. So, Mr. President, one of the points that was raised by Senator Lee, he did say that we should not make the assumption that all the raw materials are available as per our young people, and they're coming with everything. That is true. It's very unique when you deal with young people. And sometimes in creating opportunities for them, we must remember that because of their age, some of them have not been exposed to certain bits of training. They have not completed their tertiary education. Some of them, they have not had opportunities to receive certain levels of training and expertise. So youth is a very delicate group of people to work with. So you may be dealing with a teenager, for example, who already has a brilliant concept, but is still in secondary school. You can't talk to this person about collateral and some of the things that we expect from an ordinary adult. However, this legislation has to keep these people in mind. So I understand that they may not come with all the raw materials. However, that is why the agency is not a bank. And I think Senator Aziz made reference to it. He said he hopes it's not a bank. The leader of the opposition in the lower house called it a mini bank. And I want to disassociate myself with that. Senator, I can assure you it is not a bank. It's an agency. And an agency has a number of functions. So training would be one of the aspects that will seek to address what the young people are falling short of in terms of what they bring to the table. A lot of them need that, and the agency has made provisions for that. A very important note that was made was the function, the role of the agency. And I think Senator Lee expressed some anxieties about what previous agencies have not been able to achieve. This particular agency is dedicated to the youth economy solely for that purpose. I know that CEDU and NSDC and other agencies were referred to that may have been doing similar things. But it's because of the level of bureaucracy that we've experienced in those that we still have to improve, that this particular agency is dedicated for one particular purpose. Because some of those agencies deal with so many different things that anybody going to them will have to face the bureaucracy. The Youth Economy Agency is dedicated to a single purpose of helping young people access the services and the resources that we have available. A very important observation that I also agree should have been raised was the issue of the education system and how it has a function in enabling what we want to achieve in the youth economy. And Mr. President, I want to make reference to an initiative that the government undertook 2 Mondays ago. You see, what we do in this government is not haphazard. There is synchronization and there is process. 2 Mondays ago, this government had a sword-turning ceremony in cul-de-sac for the construction of a care facility, a center for adolescent rehabilitation and education. Now, Mr. President, this type of agency is a different type of quote-unquote school. And it seeks to do exactly what the senator was asking about. Because he mentioned, I think, a center of excellence. It is not named a center of excellence, but the objective of a facility like CARE is in line with exactly what he's saying. And I'm very happy he raised that. Of course, CARE does not have all the answers, but that is a step in the direction we want to go. And the Prime Minister, in assigning the portfolio of education, included vocational studies as one of the areas under that portfolio. And that is what CARE, a facility like CARE, does to complement NSDC and all the other after-school and what we call continuous education programs that are available. Because young people who did not make it through the regular conventional education system, the grammar schools, have an opportunity to make it through CARE. So I want to give him that as an example of a step in that direction. Mr. President, I also noted that the senator made reference to something that I had mentioned in the science fair, and I think he's very much on point. But one of the things that I think we may have fallen short of, and we can obviously consider, is how to make linkages between the students in school and the private sector, because that is where you can tap into some of the deficiencies that the regular school system cannot address. And so outside of the formal school, a student with a great idea, for example, in science that has to do with recycling or with production, can be linked with a private sector agency that has already established a business in that segment. I remembered one of my former students had a very interesting science fair project, and the agency that was, it was a solar-based type of renewable energy project. And what we did is, through my HOD, my head of department, we formed a relationship with Solar Dynamics at the time. They were a hot water company. And they provided the sponsorship, some of the technical skills and the training for the child to enhance his project, and financing the entire thing. This young man actually eventually started working with the business establishment. Now, the youth economy doesn't just want him to work for that person, but hopefully he would have started to build his product from there. And these types of linkages we must encourage in the education system. There are businesses that exist in this country that we can associate and link, if you want to call them mentors, if you want to call them sponsors or partners with the school, whatever you want to call them, that can be associated with schools to do, we can start with apprenticeship programs to help children or students with ideas that are aligned with that type of business to be able to develop it. And so I believe that that is a move that we can make to help facilitate the process. The senator also made reference to the term activity, and he referenced that you must not try to decide for the young people what are the activities that conceptualize or that they should engage in. I agree. However, in fact, in the previous sitting or in the lower house, one additional activity was added, and it will be done in the amendments at committee stage, and that was technology. While I agree that you cannot dictate a list of activities, but you have to start somewhere. And that list is inexhaustive. I am sure that young people will come up with hundreds of activities. And even if you add some, or you limit some, or there will be. So I believe that Senator Lee has made a very good observation. And what we want to do is to continue to review what we consider activities. And I believe that in the implementation process, some of these can lead to perhaps an amendment that can read something like including, rather than just one list. So we welcome that, and I think that was an observation that was well placed. Senator Lee also made mention of the issue of the approval by the minister of an appointee on a board, I think. I think that almost every statutory board or agency in this country, in some way or another, in the legislation or in the bylaws, makes reference to the appointment by the minister. But I will leave this one to say that we need to revisit it. I think we need to revisit it because of the unique function of that particular agency. Also, Section 46F was referred to, not in the way that the leader of opposition business did, but I think Senator Jawahir addressed it when she spoke. I followed her when I made a quick trip downstairs, and I think she did address the issue of the site, the business site, not necessarily being a physical site or building, but it could exist virtually. And that should be taken into consideration when we interpret business site, particularly in this age. So I think to some extent that was addressed. However, in the event that an applicant may not be able to have established a physical business site. That would trigger the need for the agency now to assist that applicant with getting a business site set up. So whereas in the initial proposal, an applicant may come to you with an idea, but had not taken into consideration the business side, then because of that requirement, the agency can now say, well, you know, you need a business site for that. Where is your plan? And then we can help you set up a proposal that can include a business site. So it allows for that to be incorporated. Finally, I think with reference to Senator Lee, he made reference to something that I think has been discussed many times, and that is the percentage or the amount allocated for services, consultancies, and all of that. I did explain to the leader of opposition business, now that in his chair I'll repeat, that their concept of consultancy is nothing close to what most of us think it is. And it's not $15 million for a foreign entity to do what we can do. However, I want to emphasize that when you initially start an initiative, there would be need right now, not necessarily next year and the year after, but right now, to spend that money or to put these resources into setting up to start up. So it may not necessarily be $5 million in the next rollout, but the initial cost, and let us not underestimate consultancy. It's not that it's a sin. You really need some expert knowledge and advice. You don't want to get started in something and everybody's an amateur. You need people to be properly guided, right? However, it is not something that we expect to be there every single time. We'll have half the allocation going to services, consultancies. No, it is because it is the first initial stage, and so you can expect there to be some initial setup expenses. A couple of very notable points that were raised by Senator Aziz, Mr. President, is the role of the agencies, and he did mention making a paradigm shift, which is a well-noted point. However, I must tell Senator Aziz that in making the shift, he mentioned radical, but sometimes when it comes to young people, you need to be they themselves are already so radical sometimes, that you need to be a little bit gentle and gradual. You need to take your time about it. Because whereas you want them to drive the process, but you want to hold their hands too. So we have to find a balance between radical and gradual. Mr. President, the bureaucracy issue that was raised by Senator Aziz is well placed. I believe the Youth Economy Agency being dedicated to that particular group will remove that. Because the bureaucracy is in the banks, and the example Senator Shalry raised is true. It's everywhere. Young people turn all over, and they can't find anything because they're asking them for all kinds of things that they do not have. This agency, while there are certain requirements, but it is more flexible, and it is the only place that they will be able to find that particular service. So I think that will help to reduce the level of bureaucracy because it's dedicated to that particular role. There was also an issue, well, the question about being a bank, I think I answered that. Senator Aziz, the agency, the Youth Economy Agency is not a bank. I want to specifically say that it is not. And it is not a mini bank either, not kind of bank, because it's not going to require what the banks require for young people to get started. Banks don't give grants, they only give loans. This agency has a grants component, and so it is not a bank. Finally, trust over performance was a very interesting observation. And I believe young people have felt that in this country we don't trust them. We talk to them, and when they talk back to us, we just think that we know better. And I've been through it because I've been working with them. However, there must be it's a very thin line between trust and accountability. Even if I trust you with something, but I have to find a way to make you accountable for what I put in your hands. And so at all stages, we have to ensure that we evaluate and there is accountability. That is why some of the checks and balances are in place. It's not to stifle and to prevent a young person who has an idea from going forward with it. But you must say, wait, listen, while I trust what you do, I'm going to take a risk with you. However, you have to understand that you need to account, you need to report. We need to see that what we've invested in you is, you can account for it. And so there I think we need to, just like we did with the initial issue, the initial point with being radical, and I said radical but gentle. Yes, we can trust, but we have to be accountable. Mr. President, one thing I just thought I needed to add as I rebut and complete this rebuttal is that one of the issues with the Youth Economy Agency, or the youth economy itself, is that we intend to ensure that we have mentors involved. Real, serious, accomplished, exemplary business people who can help hold the hands of our young people, especially those who are already in business, when we go forward. And so that is something that I look forward to. Again, Mr. President, I want to thank all the senators who contributed to the bill. I want to thank them for the observations they made, albeit in some different methods were used. It is clearly a bill that is new, and it will need some growth and building on. This government remains committed to reconsidering what it's doing, and at the appropriate time can return to improve on it. In the meantime, I ask that the young people of this country, and I'll borrow the word from Senator Aziz, trust what we're doing. It's for them, and they will need to work with us so we can have this mutual trust. They trust what we're doing, and we trust their ideas. And that is the only way this youth economy can actually work for the people that it was intended for. I thank you again, Mr. President, for your indulgence.
Senators, the question is the Youth Economy Bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many ayes are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. As many ayes are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide young people an economic space to turn hobbies into entrepreneurship and skills into businesses, to establish the Youth Economy Agency for the Youth Economy Program, to facilitate the development of a youth economy project and provide special incentives and for related matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 1, clauses 3 to 45.
Youth Economy Agency.
Part 1, clauses 3 to 45 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 2, clauses 46 to 50.
Youth Economy Program.
Part 2, clauses 46 to 50 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 3, clauses 51 to 57.
Tax relief and exemptions.
Part 3, clauses 51 to 57 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Part 4, clauses 58 to 61.
Miscellaneous.
Part 4, clauses 58 to 61 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Schedule 1.
Section 2.
Schedule 1 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Schedule 2.
Section 54, 3A.
Schedule 2 stands part of the bill.
Aye.
Clause 1.
Short title and commencement.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Senators, the question is that the committee rises and this bill be reported. I now put
On the Schedule 1.
Schedule 1.
Yes, Mr. President, on the Schedule 1, I propose that we insert a new activity, under activity, page 37.
1 second.
Page 37, under activity, there are 13 that I listed. I
1 second.
propose that we include 14th activity and termed technology.
Oh yeah. Schedule 1 under activity. Could you repeat that?
Yes, under Schedule 1 under activity, currently there are 13 listed. After consultation, I propose that the 14th be included and it be termed technology.
1 second. Let me get to that page. 1 second. Okay, right here. Where's that? So we are, oh, yeah. Okay, so you are suggesting that under Schedule 1, the activity be another item.
Under activity.
Be item 14 be added to reflect technology.
Technology, correct.
Yeah. Senators, we go to. Senators, the questions that the committee raises and this bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as are the opinions say aye. Aye. As many as are the contrary opinions say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Senators, I beg to report that the Youth Economy Bill went through committee without amendments. And I want to bring to your attention that those of you who may be thinking that that we just amended the bill by inserting a new by inserting technology. The fact is the amendment was not made in this House. It was just brought to the attention of this House. In fact, the amendment was made at a previous sitting of the lower house. So the bill has gone through committee without any amendments. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and that the bill be read a third time and passed.
Senators, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Youth Economy Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the Queen's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and the Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Youth Economy Act 2022.
Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I move that this House stand suspended until 2:40 for lunch, for 1 hour.
Is it 2:40?
2:40.
2:40. 2:45.
2:45.
2:45. The senators to questions that the sitting of the Senate be suspended until 2:45. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
All right.